My name's Conrad. I'm 29, and if you had told me a year ago that my own brother would try to ruin one of the most important days of my life out of jealousy, I would have laughed in your face. Because that's the thing about family. You think you know them. You think they've got your back. Until one day, you wake up and realize they've been quietly sharpening the knife the entire time. I grew up in a middle-class family where appearances were everything. My mom loved having a picture-perfect image, holiday cards with everyone smiling, family dinners that looked straight out of a Hallmark movie, even though half the time we'd be arguing right before she clicked the camera. My dad was quiet, the kind who worked long hours and didn't want to get involved in drama. That left me and my older brother, Mason. He's 2 years older than me, 31 now, and he's always been the golden child. You know the type. Charming, talented, and somehow never at fault. Mason could talk his way out of anything, and my parents ate it up. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I did my own thing, stayed out of trouble, focused on school. I wasn't jealous of Mason, not at first. I actually admired him. He was into photography since he was a teenager, and he turned it into a full-time career. Weddings, portraits, travel gigs, you name it. Everyone in our family bragged about his artistic eye. He even won a local award once, and my mom framed the certificate in the living room like it was a Pulitzer. But somewhere along the line, Mason started looking at me differently. I think it was when I got engaged to my fiancée, Leah. We met through mutual friends, dated for 3 years, and got engaged last spring. She's warm, funny, and incredibly patient, especially with my family, who can be a lot. Mason didn't take the engagement well. When I told him, he laughed and said, "Wow, didn't think you were the marrying type. Little bro, guess miracles do happen." He said it with a grin, but there was this tightness in his voice that didn't sit right with me. From that point, things started to shift. Every time Leah and I were around my family, Mason would find little ways to undermine me. If Leah complimented me for cooking dinner, he'd say something like, "Oh, I didn't know Conrad could even boil water." If I mentioned a project from work, he'd joke, "Careful, bro, don't strain yourself being productive for once." It was like he couldn't handle me being happy. When we started planning the wedding, Leah and I decided to keep it small, close friends, family, nothing too fancy. My mom wasn't thrilled. She wanted something grand, something she could post about online. "It's your only wedding, Conrad," she said. "You'll regret not doing it big." Mason chimed in with, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure the photos make it look expensive." That was the first time he offered to be our photographer. Leah was hesitant. She'd seen how Mason acted toward me, but my parents jumped on the idea immediately. "That's so generous of him," my mom said. "He's saving you thousands. Think of it as his wedding gift." Mason gave this smug smile and said, "Yeah, it's my gift to the happy couple. I'll make sure Conrad looks his best, for once." Everyone laughed except Leah. I tried to convince her it'd be fine. I wanted to keep the peace. "He's good at what he does," I told her, "and maybe this is his way of trying to make amends." She sighed but agreed. In hindsight, that was my first big mistake. As the months went on, Mason became strangely involved in our wedding planning. He'd text Leah suggesting photo-friendly color palettes or recommend venues based on lighting rather than atmosphere. It got intrusive fast. When Leah gently told him she already had her vision, he got defensive. "Just trying to help," he said, but his tone was sharp. Then he added, "You'll thank me when the pictures go viral." I brushed it off at first, but Leah started to feel uncomfortable around him. One night she told me, "Your brother doesn't like me. I can feel it. It's like he's waiting for me to mess up." I told her Mason could just be socially awkward sometimes, but deep down, I knew she was right. Things really started to unravel at my bachelor dinner. Mason showed up late, wearing sunglasses indoors, and immediately made the night about himself. "Sorry I'm late, guys. Had to shoot a celebrity event downtown. You know how it is." Then he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Can't believe my little brother's settling down before me. You sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility?" Everyone laughed awkwardly, but I felt that sting again. It was like he couldn't let a moment pass without reminding me I was somehow beneath him. After dinner, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, don't take this the wrong way, but Leah seems high maintenance. You sure she's marrying you for the right reasons?" I told him that was out of line, and he just smirked. "Relax, man. Just looking out for you." The wedding day itself started beautifully, at least at first. Leah looked stunning. The weather was perfect, The venue was everything we hoped for. Mason arrived early, all smiles, with his camera gear and a new assistant. He acted professional, gave us directions for poses, cracked jokes. For a few hours, I actually thought I might have misjudged him. But then, small things started to feel off. During the couple photos, Mason kept telling me to loosen up in this condescending tone. He'd say things like, "Come on, Conrad, smile like you're not terrified." Or, "Leah, maybe turn your head a bit. Let's not have you outshine the groom too much." Everyone laughed it off, but I noticed how his assistant looked uncomfortable. Later that night, at the reception, Mason drank a little too much. He grabbed the mic and gave a toast that started out sweet and ended with, "Well, Leah, good luck taming this guy. You're gonna need it." My parents laughed. Leah's family didn't. I wanted to crawl under the table. After the wedding, we didn't get our photos right away. Mason said he needed time for post-production. A week turned into 2, then 3. I reached out, and he said, "Chill, man. I'm making you look cinematic." Finally, after 6 weeks, he sent over the album. At first, I thought something was wrong with my screen. My face looked warped. My skin tone was uneven, my teeth slightly yellowed, and my eyes had been subtly edited to look tired or dull. In some pictures, my posture was off balance, like I was slouching. Meanwhile, Leah looked flawless, but not in a good way. It was almost unnatural, like he tried to make her look like a model rather than herself. Every image had been tweaked just enough to make me look awkward and her look distant. Leah stared at the photos in silence for a long time. Then she whispered, "He did this on purpose." I didn't want to believe it. But then I checked Mason's Instagram, and there they were. The same photos, posted publicly with captions like, "Always an honor to shoot my little brother's wedding. True love is hard to capture, but imperfections tell the story." The comments were brutal. People joked about my expressions, about how unphotogenic I was. Some even asked if I'd been nervous or sick that day. Mason replied to one comment with, "Haha, maybe just camera shy." That's when it hit me. He wasn't trying to help. He was trying to humiliate me. Leah was furious. "He did this to make you look like a joke," she said. This wasn't an accident. And she was right. Because what Mason didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have realized, was that someone else at that wedding had been taking photos too. Someone whose work would soon expose him for what he really was. But I'll get to that part later. Because before the revenge came the fallout. And that's where everything truly began to spiral. When I showed my parents the photos, they didn't react the way I expected. I thought they'd be shocked, maybe angry on my behalf. But instead, my mom tilted her head, scrolled through the album, and said, "Well, I think they're artistic. Mason always has a unique eye." Unique? I repeated, trying not to raise my voice. "Mom, he made me look like I hadn't slept in weeks. He literally edited my teeth yellow." She frowned, like I was the problem. "Conrad, don't exaggerate. Maybe that's just how you looked that day." I stared at her, speechless. Leah was sitting next to me on the couch, her jaw tightening. "Mrs. Coleman," she said carefully, "we looked perfectly fine in the raw photos Mason showed us at the wedding. He did something to them." My mom waved a hand dismissively. "Leah, sweetie, I'm sure Mason wouldn't do that. He's a professional." I wanted to shout. I wanted to ask why Mason was always given the benefit of the doubt while I was treated like I was overreacting. But I'd been down that road before. My parents were experts at minimizing anything Mason did wrong. When I was 14, Mason accidentally deleted a project I'd spent weeks on. My dad said, "You should have saved a backup." When I was 17, Mason borrowed my car and returned it with a dent in the bumper. My mom said, "At least he filled up the tank." This was no different. They always excused him, no matter what he did. But Leah wasn't having it. After we left their house, she exploded the moment we got in the car. "I'm done being polite, Conrad. Your brother's a narcissist, and your parents enable him." I didn't even try to defend them. She was right. I'd spent my entire life trying to keep the peace in a family that didn't want peace. They wanted control. Mason had been their golden ticket, their success story. And now that I was married, with a life that didn't revolve around them, it was like they couldn't stand it. Still, I tried to be rational. I texted Mason that night and asked to meet for coffee. I didn't accuse him. I just said I wanted to talk about the photos. He replied immediately, "Sure thing. Bro, don't be too dramatic, okay?" That one sentence already told me how the meeting would go. We met at a small cafe downtown. Mason arrived late. Of course, and sat down like he owned the place. Sunglasses, perfect hair, camera bag slung casually over his chair. He didn't even apologize. "So," he said, stirring his coffee, "what's the issue?" I kept my voice calm. "You know what the issue is. Those photos. You made me look ridiculous." He smiled faintly. "I didn't make you look that way, Conrad. I just enhanced the natural vibe." "Natural vibe?" I repeated. "You edited me like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes are bloodshot in half of them." Mason shrugged. "I'm sorry if you don't like my artistic direction. I go for realism, not fairy tales." "That's not realism, Mason. That's spite." He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Come on, don't be sensitive. It's not my fault you're insecure about how you look." For a moment, I actually saw red. But I forced myself to stay composed. "You posted them online to humiliate me." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You think I'd waste my time trying to humiliate you? You're not that important." That line hit harder than it should have. He said it with this coldness that made me realize something I'd ignored for years. He genuinely hated me. "I'm taking the photos down," I said. He laughed. "Good luck with that. They're my intellectual property. You signed the contract, remember?" He was right. I'd signed his standard photography agreement without thinking twice. It gave him the right to post images for portfolio purposes. He'd weaponized that against me. "You're unbelievable," I said quietly. "You've turned our wedding into a joke." He leaned in, his tone suddenly soft, almost sympathetic. "Conrad, you've always been so sensitive. That's your problem. You take everything personally. Maybe if you learned to relax, people wouldn't walk all over you." That was rich, him talking about people walking over me. I left the cafe without another word. But as I walked back to my car, something clicked. Mason wasn't just arrogant, he was calculated. He wanted me to react, to look like the irrational little brother while he played the misunderstood artist. It was a game to him. When I told Leah about the meeting, she was livid. "You need to cut him off completely," she said. "He's toxic, Conrad." I agreed. But cutting Mason off wasn't as simple as blocking his number. He was still tied to our family, and my parents refused to believe he could do any wrong. Every time we saw them, his name came up. "Have you thanked Mason properly for the photos?" my mom would ask. "Yes, Mom," I'd reply through gritted teeth. "Good. You put a lot of work into them." Work. Right. A few weeks later, the situation got worse. Much worse. It started when one of Leah's co-workers found the wedding photos on Instagram. She came up to Leah at work and said, "I saw your wedding pictures online. They're interesting. Is everything okay between you two?" Leah came home mortified. "He's making people think our marriage is a joke," she said. "I can't believe your brother is getting away with this." I went online again, and my stomach dropped. Mason had posted more. Behind-the-scenes shots, bloopers, even one where I was mid-blink with the caption, "Caught the groom deep in thought." The comments were even crueler now. This time, I didn't ask him to take them down. I demanded it. He replied with a single message, "Try me, little bro." The next day, my mom called. "Conrad, what did you say to Mason?" "He's upset. He's upset." I snapped. "He's destroying my reputation, Mom." "Oh, stop being dramatic. It's just pictures. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." That phrase, "mountain out of a molehill," was my mother's favorite. She'd used it my entire life to dismiss my feelings. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But the damage was done. I was done playing nice. Meanwhile, Leah had started reaching out to other photographers from the wedding, friends who'd brought their cameras just for fun. One of them, a mutual friend named Evan, had taken a bunch of candid shots throughout the day. He sent us a folder, and when I opened it, my heart sank. They were beautiful, natural, emotional, full of love. Exactly how the day had felt. And in those photos, I looked normal, happy, not exhausted, not awkward, just me. Which meant Mason's edits were intentional. Every unflattering change he'd made was deliberate. When I showed my parents the comparison, my dad said, "Well, maybe Mason's just experimenting with his style." "His style?" I said. "Dad, his style is defamation." He sighed. "Conrad, your brother's had a tough time lately. You know he's been struggling to get clients since that magazine job fell through. So that's what this was about. Jealousy." Mason was projecting his failures onto me. My engagement, my marriage, it all symbolized a kind of stability he didn't have. But instead of admitting that, he decided to destroy what I had. I didn't tell my parents that Leah and I had already started looking into our legal options. I didn't tell them we'd contacted a friend who worked in media law. Because I knew if Mason caught wind of it, he'd twist it into another sob story about how his ungrateful brother was trying to ruin him. But I wasn't planning to just sit back anymore. Then, about a month later, we got an invitation to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. Leah didn't want to go, but my mom insisted. It's just family, Conrad. Don't hold grudges. We went. I wish we hadn't. The moment we walked in, Mason was there, sitting at the table, grinning. My mom had set an extra place for him like it was a surprise reunion. Look who's here, she said cheerfully. Your brother wanted to make peace. Leah's grip on my hand tightened. Mason stood up, spread his arms, and said, No hard feelings, right? I stared at him, jaw clenched. You owe us an apology, Mason. He tilted his head. For what? For publicly humiliating us. For mocking our wedding. He feigned innocence. Oh, come on. You're still mad about that? I thought you'd have a sense of humor. Leah's voice cracked. You think this is funny? People at my work are whispering about us because of you. Mason sighed dramatically. Leah, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not I'm sorry I did that. Just I'm sorry you feel that way. Classic deflection. My dad tried to intervene. Boys, let's not ruin dinner. Mason came here to talk. But Mason wasn't interested in peace. He leaned forward and said, You know what your problem is, Conrad? You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand that I'm better at something than you. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Better? You're a grown man sabotaging your brother's wedding photos. That's not better. Mason, that's pathetic. Something in his face twitched. You've always thought you were the victim, he said quietly. But maybe people just see through you. That was it. Leah stood up. We're leaving. My mom gasped. Leah, sit down. We're having dinner. No, Leah said firmly. We're not going to sit here while you let your son insult us. And we walked out. That night, I realized something had shifted permanently. There was no going back to pretending everything was fine. Mason had made it clear. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. It was war. What none of them knew, though, was that the next move wouldn't be his. Because we were already setting the stage for something he'd never see coming. A few weeks passed after that dinner, and things went eerily quiet. Too quiet. Mason hadn't posted anything new, and for a moment, I started to wonder if he'd finally moved on. Maybe my parents' little family dinner had actually worked, even if it didn't seem like it at the time. Leah didn't buy it. He's not done, she said one night as we sat in the living room. Guys like him don't let things go. They wait. She was right. I just didn't realize how right she was. About 3 weeks later, I got an email from a coworker. The subject line read, Hey, is this you? I clicked it and froze. Attached was a link to a Facebook post from a wedding photographer community group. And there it was. Our wedding photo album, the same distorted set Mason had posted on Instagram, now accompanied by a long, self-righteous caption that made my stomach turn. He wrote, When your own family hires you and then accuses you of sabotage because they don't understand art. It's hard being an artist when people expect airbrushed fairy tales instead of honesty. Some clients can't handle the truth in their own faces. It got worse. He'd blurred out our last names, but kept enough context that anyone local could piece together who we were. Several people in the comments recognized the venue. A few photographers chimed in with things like, Yikes, sounds like a nightmare couple, or typical clients. Want everything for free and then complain. He was painting us as ungrateful, shallow, and entitled. Leah saw it before I could even tell her. I found her in the kitchen, clutching her phone, shaking with anger. He's making us out to be villains, she said, her voice trembling. And people believe him, Conrad. Look at the comments. There were hundreds. People calling us names, mocking us for not respecting the artist's vision. And Mason? He was loving it. He was replying to comments with things like, I guess some people just can't handle authenticity. Or, it's sad when family turns toxic. Toxic. The irony nearly made me laugh. That post spread quickly in the local wedding scene. Leah worked in event planning, and within days, vendors she knew started treating her differently. A florist she'd collaborated with before declined to work with her on a project, saying, We just want to stay out of the drama. That night, Leah broke down. She sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face, and said, I can't believe your brother did this. He's ruining my reputation, Conrad. And that's when something inside me shifted. Up until that point, I'd been angry, frustrated, humiliated, but now it felt different. Now it was personal. I called Mason. Straight to voicemail. Texted him. No reply. I drove to his apartment the next morning, but when I got there, he wouldn't open the door. I could hear him moving inside, pretending not to be home. That's when I saw something through the small window near his front door. A printed copy of one of our wedding photos, taped to the wall. The same edited version of me with the dull eyes and uneven skin tone. He'd framed it like it was some kind of trophy. I stood there for a minute, completely numb, before finally leaving. That weekend, my mom called out of the blue. Honey, your brother's upset again, she started. I don't care, I said flatly. Well, you should, she said sharply. He told us you've been harassing him, showing up at his home, threatening him. What's going on, Conrad? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He told you that? Yes, she said. And frankly, I believe him. You've been acting strange lately. Acting strange. I wanted to scream. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He's been publicly trashing me and Leah online. He's costing her work opportunities. He edited our photos to humiliate us. And you're still taking his side. Maybe if you just apologized, she said softly, he'd take them down. That broke me. Not because of what she said, but because of how little she understood. Apologize? For what? For being his target? That night, Leah and I sat together, trying to decide what to do next. She wanted to contact a lawyer. I wanted to go over to his place and make him delete everything with my own hands. But we both knew that would only give him more ammunition. So instead, we waited. The next morning, I woke up to 50 missed calls from family members. My stomach dropped before I even unlocked my phone. My aunt's text was the first one I saw. Conrad, why would you say those things about your brother online? This is getting out of hand. Confused, I opened Facebook. Mason had posted again, but this time, he'd gone nuclear. He'd uploaded screenshots of fake messages that looked like they were from me. In them, I supposedly told him he was a failure, that Leah and I only invited him out of pity, and that his work was garbage compared to real photographers. And people believed it. The comments section was full of sympathy for him. Wow, your brother sounds awful. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. Can't believe he treated you like that after you photographed his wedding for free. Leah and I sat in silence, watching it unfold in real time. I tried to laugh it off at first, but my chest felt tight. He actually fabricated messages. That's next-level psychotic. But Leah wasn't laughing. She stared at me, her voice shaking. Conrad, this is libel. This isn't just him being a jerk anymore. This is defamation. She was right. Mason had crossed from petty revenge into something darker, something deliberate. We gathered evidence, screenshots, timestamps, messages. But before we could even act, Mason made his next move. 2 days later, Leah's company called her into a meeting. Her boss told her they'd received complaints about her professionalism, with references to the public scandal involving her husband's family. They didn't fire her, but they suspended her from active projects until things settled down. Leah came home that day pale and silent. She didn't even take off her coat when she walked through the door. He's destroying everything we've worked for, she whispered. I took her hand, but I could feel how tense she was. We'll fix this, I said. But the truth was, I didn't know how. That night, I sat up scrolling through Mason's social media. I found something strange. His following had skyrocketed. Thousands of new followers in just a week. He was milking our situation for engagement. He even started a YouTube channel where he'd post behind-the-scenes breakdowns of his photography work, using our wedding as an example of difficult clients. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos, those comments. At around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It said, "Thought you'd like to see what real editing looks like." Attached was a photo. A new one. It was Leah, her wedding portrait, but Mason had edited her face. He'd distorted her smile, made her makeup look clownish, her dress wrinkled, her expression smug. It was malicious, cruel, almost cartoonish. I woke Leah up immediately. She looked at it once, then burst into tears. "He's obsessed, Conrad," she said between sobs. "This isn't just revenge. He's trying to break us." That was when I made my decision. Enough was enough. We filed a cease and desist through Leah's friend-in-law. Mason ignored it. My parents called again, furious that we'd involved lawyers against family. My mom said, "You're tearing this family apart, Conrad." I laughed bitterly. "No, Mom. Mason did that a long time ago." But she didn't hear me. She was too busy defending her favorite son. 2 weeks later, something happened that I'll never forget. My dad called. Not my mom, my dad. He rarely called me directly. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Conrad," he said, "I think you should come over." "Why?" "It's Mason," he said. "He showed us something tonight. Something about you." When we got there, my mom was sitting on the couch, pale and shaking. Mason was there too, standing smugly beside the TV. "Hey, little bro," he said casually. "Want to explain this?" On the screen was a video. It looked like a screen recording of messages, again, supposedly from me. But this time, they were worse. In them, I supposedly admitted to sabotaging Mason's career years ago by badmouthing him to clients. I supposedly called him names, insulted my parents, and bragged about ruining his chances with a woman he once dated. It was all fake. Every single line. But the way he presented it, with fake timestamps, profile pictures, and edited chat bubbles, it looked real. My mom was crying. "How could you, Conrad?" "I didn't," I said, my throat tight. "That's not me. Mason faked that." She looked at Mason, then back at me. "Why would he do that?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, Conrad. Why would I?" Leah stepped forward. "Because you're jealous. Because you can't stand seeing your brother happy while you're miserable." Mason's eyes flicked to her, cold and sharp. "You've always been manipulative," he said. "You turned him against his own family." That was the moment I realized something terrifying. Mason wasn't just trying to ruin my reputation. He wanted to isolate me, to make everyone else see me the way he saw me, undeserving, inferior, pathetic. And for a while, it worked. My parents didn't talk to me for weeks after that night. Family friends started pulling away. Even some of Leah's friends started avoiding us, afraid of being caught in the drama. But what Mason didn't know was that he'd made one fatal mistake. In his arrogance, he left a trail. Small details, metadata, file inconsistencies, timestamps that didn't line up. And the moment I noticed them, I knew exactly how to turn the tables. Because Mason wasn't the only one who could play dirty. But before I struck back, something else happened. Something that made this whole situation spiral completely out of control. The weeks that followed were the worst of my life. Every day felt like a slow-motion collapse, the kind where you can see the destruction coming. But no matter what you do, you can't stop it. Mason had managed to turn nearly everyone I loved, or at least everyone who used to respect me, against me. It started with the silence. My parents stopped answering my calls. My mom, who used to text me daily about small things like family dinners or recipes, suddenly disappeared from my inbox. I tried reaching out to my dad, but every conversation was brief, polite, and hollow. He always ended with, "Your mother's still upset, son. Give her time." Time. That was always their solution. Wait it out. Don't make waves. Keep quiet. But this time, it wasn't a storm that would pass. Mason had poisoned the well, and my family drank from it willingly. Leah, meanwhile, was losing her own footing. Her suspension at work had turned into what her company called an indefinite leave. They didn't fire her outright, but it was clear they wanted distance. She spent her days scrolling through emails, trying to find freelance clients, but her messages often went unanswered. A few replied politely, saying things like, "Maybe once things settle down." One evening, I walked into our living room and found her sitting in the dark, laptop closed, staring at the wall. I turned on a lamp, and she flinched. "Hey," I said softly. "You okay?" She nodded without looking at me. "Yeah, just tired." But I could tell she wasn't. There was this quiet resignation in her voice, the kind that comes when you've been pushed so far that fighting starts to feel pointless. That broke me. I sat beside her and took her hand. "We're going to fix this, Leah. I promise." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "How?" "He's got everyone believing his story. Every time we speak up, we look defensive. Every time we stay quiet, we look guilty." I didn't have an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the kind of helplessness that eats away at your confidence. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was humiliation. My own brother had stripped me of my reputation, my family's trust, and my wife's peace of mind. And somehow, he was thriving. His photography page had blown up. He'd been featured in a local magazine as an honest artist standing firm against toxic clients. He'd turned our pain into publicity. 2 days later, my mom called. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in almost a month. "Conrad," she said curtly, "I think you owe your brother an apology." I nearly dropped the phone. "Come again. He came over last night," she continued. He showed us messages, real ones this time. Things you said about us. About how you were done with this family. My stomach dropped. Mom, those aren't real. He's faking everything. Stop it, she snapped. You've been blaming him for everything since you were kids. When are you going to take responsibility for your actions? It was like every childhood memory I'd buried came rushing back. The endless comparisons, the subtle favoritism, the way my parents always made excuses for Mason. Mom, I said quietly, do you hear yourself? He's manipulating you. He's done it for years. Enough, Conrad, she said, her voice trembling now. You're not welcome here until you can be civil. Then she hung up. I just sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. Leah came into the room and saw my face. They took his side again, didn't they? I nodded. They don't even want me at the house anymore. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me. And in that moment, I realized how much she'd been carrying, how much this had cost her. Not just the public humiliation, but watching me fall apart piece by piece. After that, we stopped trying to fix things. We stopped explaining ourselves. There was no point. Every attempt to clear our names only fueled Mason's narrative. We started withdrawing from everyone. Mutual friends, co-workers, even extended family. Leah deleted her social media accounts entirely. I kept mine, but only to document everything Mason posted for evidence. That's when the nightmare started. I dreamed that Mason was standing at the end of our bed, holding his camera, taking pictures of us while we slept. I'd wake up sweating, convinced I'd heard the click of a shutter. I became paranoid. I'd see flashes of light outside our windows and think it was him. Once, I even ran outside at midnight because I swore I saw someone near our mailbox. But when I got there, the street was empty. Leah begged me to see someone, maybe talk to a therapist. But I couldn't. I didn't want to explain to a stranger that my brother, the same guy who used to build Lego castles with me as a kid, was now trying to destroy my life. Then one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Mason's lawyer. A cease and desist. For harassment. Apparently, Mason had filed a complaint saying I'd been spreading false information and attempting to damage his business reputation. The letter warned that any further defamatory claims could lead to a lawsuit. I couldn't believe it. The man who ruined my wedding photos, fabricated messages, and publicly mocked me was now claiming I was harassing him. I showed Leah the letter, and she just stared at it in disbelief. He's flipping the script again, she said. He's making you the aggressor. And he was good at it. Too good. He knew exactly how to play the system. But that was also the moment something changed inside me. I stopped feeling scared. I stopped feeling helpless. The anger that had been simmering under the surface began to solidify into something colder, sharper, purpose. That night, while Leah slept, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started making a folder. I called it Project Exposure. I organized everything, screenshots, timestamps, side-by-side comparisons of his edited and original photos, emails, text logs, his fake evidence. I backed everything up to an encrypted drive. I wasn't sure how I'd use it yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let him win. For weeks, I stayed quiet. I didn't respond to Mason's posts. I didn't contact my parents. I didn't even mention him to anyone. Outwardly, I was silent. Inwardly, I was plotting. Leah started noticing the shift. You seem calmer, she said one morning over coffee. I'm done reacting, I told her. He feeds off that. He wants a reaction. So what's the plan? She asked. You'll see, I said. Not yet, but soon. She nodded slowly. I think she knew what was happening, even if I didn't say it out loud. This wasn't about making Mason feel guilty anymore. This was about accountability. But before I could put any plan into motion, life dealt us another blow. Leah's grandmother passed away suddenly. She lived in another state, and Leah wanted to attend the funeral. I told her I'd stay home to handle work and follow up on a few things regarding Mason. She agreed, though I could tell she hated leaving me alone. The morning she left, she hugged me tightly and said, "Promise me you won't do anything reckless." I promised, but the house felt unbearable without her. Too quiet, too full of memories of everything that had gone wrong. 3 nights later, I got another message from an unknown number again. It was a video this time. I hesitated before playing it. When I did, I almost dropped my phone. It was security footage, grainy, low quality, but unmistakable. It showed me, standing outside a photography studio. Mason's studio. But here's the thing. I'd never been there. The timestamp showed the night before. In the video, I looked angry, pacing in front of the door, then pounding on it. It ended with me supposedly kicking the door once before storming off. Attached was a text. Next time you vandalize my property, I'll call the police. I felt my blood run cold. Mason had staged it. Probably hired someone to impersonate me in the dark, maybe even used video manipulation. He was setting me up. And this time, he was escalating to something dangerous. When Leah got home 2 days later, I showed her everything. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said quietly, "He's trying to push you over the edge." And she was right. But what Mason didn't know was that he'd already done it. Not by breaking me, but by waking up a part of me that had finally stopped caring about keeping the peace. The kind of calm that comes not from forgiveness, but from absolute clarity. I wasn't going to confront him anymore. I wasn't going to beg my parents to see reason. I was going to take everything he'd done, the lies, the manipulation, the evidence, and turn it into something so public, so undeniable, that he'd never be able to talk his way out of it again. But before I could set the plan in motion, Mason made one more move. One that hit lower than I ever thought he could go. And that's when things truly began to unravel. It's strange how quickly despair can turn into drive once you've lost everything. After months of humiliation, silence, and that gut-twisting helplessness, something inside me hardened. The fear was still there, but it wasn't running the show anymore. I'd hit the bottom, and when you're already there, the only direction left is up. Leah noticed the shift first. "You've been smiling in your sleep lately," she said one morning. I chuckled. Maybe I'm dreaming of payback. She smiled faintly, but I could see the worry behind her eyes. "Just don't lose yourself in it." "I won't," I said, but I already knew I was lost in it, just not in the way she feared. For the first time in months, I felt focused. Clear. I started small. Every night, after Leah went to bed, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, headphones in, building a case piece by piece. I'd learned that Mason's studio website used a third-party content platform that stored version histories of uploaded photos. If you knew how to access the backend data, well, let's just say deleted files weren't really deleted. I found them. Every unedited shot from our wedding, time-stamped, metadata intact. They were perfect, raw, emotional, untouched. The same files he'd later distorted to make me look like a fool. That was my first victory. The proof that everything he'd done was deliberate. The next step was finding leverage. Not legal yet, public. Mason thrived on perception. He cared about being admired, respected, envied. If his reputation cracked, his ego would shatter. So I started building an online presence of my own. Quietly, carefully. I created a photography blog under a pseudonym, The Honest Lens. It was designed like an industry insider page, posting thoughtful critiques of photo manipulation, integrity in editing, and the ethics of digital artistry. And every week, I'd feature a new case study. Subtle ones at first, wedding photos ruined by unethical editing, clients misrepresented by careless photographers. I never mentioned Mason's name, but anyone in the local photography community who looked close enough would start connecting the dots. Meanwhile, Leah's luck started to turn. A small design agency reached out after seeing her portfolio on an old site she'd forgotten about. They loved her work and didn't care about the drama. Watching her get that first freelance project again was like seeing color return to her face. "You think this is the start of things getting better?" she asked me one night as we ate takeout on the couch. "I think it's the start of him losing control," I said. A month passed, then two, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance began to shift. Mason's engagement online started to falter. I noticed the comments under his posts becoming mixed. Some people began asking questions like, "Hey, didn't this editing style get criticized recently on The Honest Lens?" Or, "This looks similar to that case study from that ethics blog." He ignored them at first. Then he got defensive. And that's when the real opportunity appeared. One night, I got a message from someone named Tessa, a former client of Mason's. She'd seen one of my blog posts, one that mirrored her exact experience. "I think your article is about me," she wrote. "Did you work with Mason too?" I froze. I hadn't mentioned him by name. But she knew. We started talking privately. Turns out, Mason had pulled similar stunts before, slightly warping clients' photos to make them seem raw and authentic, then posting them without permission when they complained. She even sent me screenshots of emails where he mocked his clients behind their backs. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an isolated case. Mason's cruelty wasn't just personal, it was habitual. Over the next month, I found 3 more people like her. A small network of people Mason had hurt or humiliated, all of them convinced they were alone. They weren't. We started collaborating. I anonymized their stories, published their screenshots, and turned the honest lens into a quiet movement. Not a smear campaign, an expose. At first, Mason probably didn't realize what was happening. But eventually, he did. Because one morning, I woke up to see a long, panicked rant on his business page. Beware of fake journalism targeting small artists. Don't believe anonymous blogs spreading lies about me. People are jealous of success. Classic Mason, turning victimhood into performance. But the more he protested, the guiltier he looked. A few days later, I got an email from an editor at a photography magazine. She'd seen my blog and wanted to interview the honest lens about integrity in modern editing. I hesitated. If I said yes, I'd risk exposure. But Leah looked at me and said, "You should do it. Not as revenge, just as truth." So I did. I kept it anonymous, voice disguised in the recorded interview, using only facts, documentation, and examples, many of them Mason's. The article went viral in the local creative community. The fallout was immediate. Mason's bookings dropped overnight. His sponsorship deals with 2 wedding venues were quietly canceled. And for the first time in years, he stopped posting. That silence was beautiful. But I didn't stop there. I wasn't done. Behind the scenes, I'd been working on something else, something legal. With Leah's help and Tessa's documentation, we compiled a shared claim. False representation, defamation, unauthorized use of client material. It was a slow burn, quiet emails, carefully drafted statements, but it was gathering momentum. By then, Leah's freelance work was thriving. She'd landed a big project with a destination wedding planner who'd seen her handle chaos with grace. Watching her rebuild herself while I rebuilt my plan, it gave me strength I didn't realize I still had. We started going out again. Dinners, small weekend trips, laughing without that constant tension in the air. For the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel haunted. And yet, Mason lingered like a shadow. Sometimes I'd see his profile pop up, inactive but still there. I knew he was watching. He couldn't resist. He had to see whether his little brother was still suffering. But I wasn't suffering anymore. I was thriving quietly, patiently, building momentum for something far more devastating than any public argument could achieve. The next turning point came from somewhere unexpected, an invitation. A well-known wedding expo was coming to the city, a big annual event where photographers, planners, and vendors showcased their work. Leah's new company got a booth. Mason had one too. When Leah showed me the flyer, she looked uneasy. "He'll be there," she said. "I know," I replied. "You're not planning anything reckless, right?" "Nothing reckless," I said. "Just poetic." She didn't push further, but the look in her eyes said she knew I was lying a little. In the weeks leading up to the expo, The Honest Lens announced an upcoming live reveal, a major story exposing a pattern of misconduct by a well-known industry figure. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. The buzz grew naturally. Then, 2 nights before the event, I got an email from Mason. Short. Simple. "We need to talk. Don't do anything stupid, Conrad." It was the first time he'd contacted me directly in nearly a year. I stared at that message for a long time, then replied, "You've had plenty of time to talk. I'll see you at the expo." That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anxiety this time, but from anticipation. Leah noticed. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Not for revenge. For closure." She smiled faintly. "You keep telling yourself that." The morning of the expo, the city felt electric. The venue was a massive hall buzzing with people and booths. Leah's display was elegant, minimalist. Her work spoke for itself. Mason's, on the other hand, was flashy as ever. Oversized banners, dramatic lighting, self-portraits disguised as brand art. He spotted me from across the hall, and for a split second, our eyes met. He froze. I smiled. Then the announcer's voice came over the loudspeaker. Up next, an exclusive presentation by The Honest Lens on ethics and authenticity in wedding photography. The audience gathered. Mason's head snapped toward the stage. He looked pale, and as the screen lit up with a title slide, the same blog logo he'd been denouncing for months. He realized exactly who was behind it. That was the moment the power dynamic shifted forever. But the best part wasn't the reveal itself. It was what came after. The wave of consequences, the unraveling of everything Mason had built on lies. And it all started with one click. When I walked up to the stage that morning, I felt like my heart was punching through my ribs. Not from fear. No, that part of me had burned away months ago. This was something else. Something cleaner. The feeling of a man who'd been cornered, ridiculed, and stripped of everything, finally walking into the light with truth in his hands. The crowd was larger than I expected. Rows of photographers, planners, and vendors. All those familiar faces who'd whispered about me behind my back after Mason's lies. Leah stood near the front, her arms folded, that faint proud smirk she got when she knew something big was coming. Mason was off to the side, pretending to scroll his phone, but I could see the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of panic under the surface. I began calmly. A lot of people in this industry talk about passion, creativity, and honesty. But no one really talks about power, the kind people get when they control how others are seen. The lights dimmed, and behind me, the first slide appeared, 2 photos side by side. One raw, untouched image of a smiling groom and bride. Then the same photo, warped, shadows deepened, skin tone dulled, posture subtly distorted. Both of these were taken the same day, I said. The same couple, the same camera. But the difference between them shows what happens when art becomes a weapon. A murmur rippled through the room. I clicked to the next slide, more examples. Photos of Mason's other victims, all anonymized but painfully familiar. One woman's face twisted into a caricature of itself. A groom edited to look perpetually scowling. Captions he'd used that mocked their personalities, their love stories, their humanity. And then the screen filled with receipts, emails, contracts, DMs. His words, his arrogance. Some photographers claim authenticity as an excuse to humiliate their clients. They'll call it realism or honesty, but what it really is control. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. I didn't rush. I didn't dramatize. I just laid out the facts. Each image landed heavier than the last. At one point, Mason muttered something under his breath, too low for anyone else to hear, but I saw his lips move. "You're dead." I ignored him. The final slide appeared, a screenshot of his original Instagram post about our wedding. The one where he mocked me and Leah for imperfections. I looked directly at the audience and said, "That was my wedding. I'm the brother he gifted this to." Gasps. A few people turned toward Mason. Someone whispered, "That's his brother?" Mason's face drained of color. I spent a year being told to keep quiet, to let it go, to not make waves because family comes first. But when someone weaponizes trust, family doesn't mean protection anymore. It means silence. And I'm done being silent. I stepped back. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in that low, electric buzz that happens when people are realizing they've been watching a villain masquerading as a victim. Leah walked up afterward and squeezed my hand so tight I could barely feel my fingers. "You did it," she whispered. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while the expo presentation shattered Mason's public image, I still had the legal side brewing quietly in the background. And that, I knew, would finish him. Within 48 hours, photography forums lit up with discussions about the expose. Half the comments were from stunned clients, sharing similar stories. A few even posted their own photo comparisons. Every thread eventually led back to Mason's name. His business Instagram lost over 10,000 followers in a week. Sponsorships vanished. A major event company that had used him for years released a statement saying they were reevaluating partnerships to maintain ethical standards. And then came the magazine article. The same editor who'd interviewed The Honest Lens before published a follow-up, this time revealing my identity. She'd reached out privately and asked if I was ready to go public. I hesitated for a long time. Part of me feared the backlash, the family drama being dragged into headlines. But I realized something. Mason had already stolen my privacy. This time, I'd steal back my narrative. The article hit like a storm. Photographer exposed for defamation, manipulation, and targeting clients by his own brother. It was everywhere. Mason's remaining defenders scattered. Even his usual charm couldn't save him now. He tried to post a shaky apology video, saying things like, "I was misunderstood," Art isn't always pretty, but the damage was irreversible. People weren't buying it. Comments poured in, some mocking, some furious, most disappointed. But the real blow came from within his own circle. One of Mason's former assistants, the quiet young guy who'd worked with him at my wedding, contacted me privately. He said he couldn't stay silent anymore. Apparently, Mason had not only manipulated photos but also forged client reviews, stolen editing presets from other photographers, and routinely used people's images for promotions without consent. He even admitted Mason had bragged about what he'd done to me. He said he'd make you wish you never married that girl. That message hit me hard. The assistant provided everything: timestamps, file histories, messages Mason had sent bragging about breaking clients who criticized him. We handed all of it to our lawyer. From that point on, it wasn't just about family, it was about justice. Our lawyer filed a formal complaint with the state's Photography and Business Ethics Board. At the same time, we pursued a defamation and damages suit. We knew it would take time, maybe months, maybe years, but Mason's arrogance had already left him defenseless. The first hearing was brutal for him. The board reviewed evidence, including metadata showing that his edits had intentionally exaggerated flaws. They even found that he'd photoshopped messages to fake my confessions. The digital forensics expert we hired dismantled his lies piece by piece. Mason tried to act confident, but you could see him unraveling. He blamed his assistant, claimed his files had been hacked, said he'd been experimenting with satire. But the truth was undeniable. And in a poetic twist, every piece of evidence he'd once used to smear me became the very rope he hung himself with. Meanwhile, life for me and Leah finally started to breathe again. She grew her business beyond anything we'd imagined. She started booking international clients, people who respected her resilience, who saw her as a model of grace under fire. I began consulting for small creative companies, helping them navigate contracts and ethics. Ironically, Mason's destruction became my redemption. The best part? Our relationship, mine and Leah's, became unbreakable through it all. We learned to find humor in the ashes. Sometimes, when an email from a lawyer or journalist would pop up, Leah would grin and say, "Another brick in the wall." Months later, Mason tried to contact me one last time. His tone had changed. No more arrogance, no false bravado. Just a short, defeated message. "You win. Are you happy now?" I didn't reply, not because I hated him, but because I'd finally stopped needing his validation. Revenge wasn't about making him suffer. It was about freeing myself from the version of me he'd created, the quiet brother, the scapegoat, the joke. But there was one final, quiet act of closure that I couldn't resist. A few weeks after the final hearing, I went to the park where Mason used to shoot engagement photos. It was sunset, the lights soft and golden, the kind he always called perfect hour. I sat on a bench overlooking the pond, opened my phone, and uploaded one last post to the Honest Lens. It read, "Art should tell the truth, but sometimes truth tells on the artist." Attached was a single photo, one of the original, untouched images from our wedding. Me and Leah laughing mid-spin, the sunlight cutting through her veil, no edits, no filters. Just raw, honest love. Within an hour, it went viral. Thousands of people shared it, captioning it with words like authenticity, resilience, healing. Mason's name never appeared again in my posts. I didn't need it to. Everyone already knew. That night, Leah leaned against me on the couch, scrolling through the comments. "Feels like it's over," she said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "Almost." Because while Mason had lost his career, his reputation, and every ounce of credibility he'd ever built, I still hadn't told him the one thing I'd discovered during all of this, the secret that had set everything in motion without him even realizing it. And that final truth, that was the part that broke him completely. 6 months after the hearing, life finally felt still again. No whispers, no angry calls, no anonymous messages in the middle of the night. Just quiet. I'd almost forgotten what that sounded like. Leah and I had moved to a new apartment by the lake, somewhere brighter, somewhere that didn't carry ghosts in the walls. I started each morning by brewing coffee, sitting on the balcony, and watching the sunlight dance across the water. There was something almost poetic about it, the reflection, the calm, the way light had become a metaphor for everything I'd fought to bring back into my life. But every now and then, when the breeze carried the faint click of a camera shutter from someone walking by, I'd still flinch. Trauma leaves fingerprints like that. I didn't think much about Mason anymore. Not out of forgiveness, but out of fatigue. He'd become a noise I'd finally tuned out. Or so I thought. Then one afternoon, as I was wrapping up some editing work for a new client, my phone buzzed. The name that flashed on the screen made my stomach drop. Mom. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was small, almost fragile. Conrad, it's about your brother. I didn't speak. I just waited. He's not doing well, she said finally. His business is gone. His studio shut down. Clients want refunds. He's been blacklisted from every major event company. He can't get hired anywhere. And now he's drinking again. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. Mom hesitated. He says you did this to him. I closed my eyes. He did it to himself. She didn't argue this time. That, more than anything, told me how far things had fallen. He's been staying with us, she continued. We didn't know what else to do. He barely leaves his room. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered the look on Leah's face the night she found that edited photo of herself. How small and broken she looked. I remembered the letter from the lawyer calling me a harasser. The fake messages, the lost clients, the humiliation. I hope he finds help, I said softly. But I can't be part of that. Mom sighed. He misses you. I laughed bitterly. He misses control. That ended the conversation. But something in me couldn't let it rest. Not out of compassion, out of curiosity. I wanted to see what became of him when the spotlight finally turned away. A week later, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't tell Leah. She would have tried to stop me. It was a cold, gray morning, the kind where everything feels heavier than it should. My dad answered the door, older somehow, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and shame. He's in the basement, he said quietly. Just be gentle. I wasn't sure I could be. When I went downstairs, the smell hit me first. Alcohol, stale air, and neglect. Mason was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at a dark TV screen. He looked nothing like the man who used to strut through weddings like a celebrity. His hair was unkempt, his eyes sunken. The swagger was gone. When he finally noticed me, he laughed weakly. Well, look who the internet's favorite whistleblower dragged in. I didn't respond. I just sat across from him, studying the ruins of what used to be my brother. He leaned back and sighed. You really did it, huh? You ruined me. I met his eyes. No, Mason. You ruined yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you. He smirked, but it faltered quickly. You always thought you were better than me. I never did, I said quietly. I just stopped believing you were better than everyone else. He poured himself another drink, his hands trembling. You think you won, huh? You think people love you now? You'll see. They'll forget you too. I don't need them to love me, I said. I just needed them to know the truth. For a long time, we sat in silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the old refrigerator upstairs. Mason finally broke it. They're not hiring me anywhere, he muttered. I tried doing portraits again, but no one wants to book with this scandalous artist. That's what they call me now. A joke. A liability. He laughed bitterly. You know what it's like to be laughed at, don't you? Now I do too. There was something in his tone, not quite regret, but the first crack of self-awareness I'd ever heard from him. You could have apologized, I said. You could have fixed it before it ever got this far. He shook his head slowly. I couldn't. Not after everything. I don't know how. That, somehow, hurt more than anything else. Because it was honest. Mason didn't know how to be anything but proud, even when it destroyed him. I stood to leave. As I turned toward the stairs, he spoke again, his voice low and slurred. You always wanted to beat me. Now you did. Congratulations. I stopped, but I didn't turn back. You were never the competition, Mason. You were the lesson. And I left. After that day, I didn't see him again for a long time. My parents stopped bringing him up. Leah and I focused on building our lives. And for once, the world felt aligned again. My small consulting firm grew faster than I expected. Within a year, I was speaking at conferences about ethical practices in creative industries. The irony wasn't lost on me. Leah's business exploded, too. She became one of the top event planners in the region, known for her authenticity and warmth. The same traits Mason once mocked her for became her greatest strengths. Every now and then, people would ask during interviews, what inspired you to start advocating for creative transparency? I'd smile and say, A personal experience that taught me how much harm a camera can cause when it's held by the wrong hands. That usually got a knowing nod. Then, one morning about a year later, I got another message from an unfamiliar email address. The subject line just said, "For what it's worth." It was from Mason. He wrote, "I saw the article about you and Leah. You both look happy. I'm not going to pretend I didn't hate you for what happened, but I get it now. I lost myself in trying to make people see me as something I wasn't. I guess you made me see the truth, even if it took losing everything. I sold my equipment. Going to rehab next week. Don't bother replying. I just wanted you to know you were right. M." I sat there for a long time staring at that message. There was no apology, no closure, just exhaustion, finally turned inward. I never replied. Not out of anger, just peace. Some stories don't need sequels. Leah walked in later, saw my expression, and asked, "Something wrong?" I showed her the email. She read it, then nodded. "So that's it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's it." She kissed my temple and whispered, "Good. Let it stay that way." We went out for a walk that evening. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the same kind of light Mason used to chase in his photos. Except this time, there was no camera. Just us. Real, unedited, imperfectly human. As we reached the lake, Leah stopped and looked out over the water. "You know," she said softly, "you never told me what you meant when you said you had one last secret. The thing that really broke him." I smiled faintly. "Remember that anonymous expose? The one that started everything?" She nodded. "I didn't just write it," I said. "I published it from his computer." Her head snapped toward me. "What?" "I found out his system had a cloud sync link to his old drives. I uploaded the files directly through his own metadata. The first upload pinged his IP address. The industry thought he leaked his own misconduct, trying to preempt bad press. That's what shattered his credibility before I ever stepped on that stage." Leah's jaw dropped. "You mean he thought he exposed himself?" "Exactly." I looked out at the water, watching the reflection of the sunset ripple. "He destroyed himself without even realizing it." She was silent for a long moment, then shook her head slowly, a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You're scarier than I thought." I smiled. "Only when someone gives me a reason to be." We stood there, hand in hand, the air cool and still. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing in someone's shadow. I wasn't the little brother anymore. I wasn't the family disappointment, the quiet one, the easy target. I was just Conrad, a man who finally reclaimed his story. And as the last light dipped behind the horizon, I whispered the line that had been sitting on my tongue since the day this all began, the line that defined the end of it all. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life. It's about taking yours back. My name's Luke, I'm 28, and last weekend was supposed to be one of the biggest nights of my life. After 5 years of grinding at a job I once thought would eat me alive, I'd finally gotten the promotion I'd been working toward: senior project manager, corner office, big pay bump, and for once, recognition for the insane hours I'd been putting in. I didn't throw parties often, but I decided to make an exception. I booked a private room at my favorite restaurant, invited my parents, my younger brother, and a few close friends. In my head, it was going to be this warm, slightly emotional night. One of those rare family moments where everyone sets aside their usual bickering and just celebrates together. I couldn't have been more wrong. From the moment they walked in, I could tell the mood was off. My mom was on her phone, barely glancing up when she hugged me, and my dad had that expression he gets when he's about to say something cutting. My younger brother, Mark, was wearing a hoodie and joggers, like he'd been dragged there against his will. I brushed it off and tried to stay upbeat. After all, this was my night. The drinks started flowing, the appetizers came out, and I was finally starting to relax until my dad raised his glass and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Well, we're only here because Mark didn't have plans tonight." He chuckled like it was a harmless joke, but my stomach dropped. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting, but I could feel my face getting hot. My mom smirked and added, "Don't get used to this attention, Luke, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing." The table laughed. Even Mark cracked a grin, like this was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. I just sat there, holding my glass, nodding like I was in on the joke, but inside, something shifted. It wasn't just a one-off comment. It was years of this. Years of them treating my wins like they were accidents, like I was just lucky. Growing up, every time I brought home good grades, my dad would say, Books don't mean much in the real world. When I got my first job, my mom said, "Well, we'll see how long you last." Mark could do no wrong. He was the golden child, the one they bragged about at family gatherings. I was just there, the reliable, boring one, the one they called when they needed help moving furniture or someone to dog sit. I kept the conversation light for the rest of the dinner, cracking jokes with my friends and asking everyone about their week. But I noticed the pattern. Every time someone congratulated me, my parents downplayed it. "He's just lucky the old manager quit," my dad said once. "He probably got promoted because no one else wanted the job," Mark chimed in, and my mom laughed like that was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. The whole night, I played along, smiling quietly, even though each comment landed like a stone in my chest. I'd spent so long trying to earn their approval, and now, with this major milestone, I realized they weren't ever going to give it. They didn't see me the way I wanted them to. Maybe they never had. The thing is, this promotion wasn't just a title. It came with something else. A project I'd been spearheading for months had just been picked up by a major publication. There was going to be a feature in the Sunday paper, front page of the business section, photos, interviews, the whole deal. Everyone in the company knew about it, but my family had no idea. I hadn't told them. I wanted to see their genuine reaction. I wanted them to see me, maybe for the first time ever. So I kept quiet through dinner, letting them think this was small, letting them think I was still the same Luke they could laugh at. When dessert came, my dad made one more comment, something about how I shouldn't let this go to my head. My mom said I'd better not start acting too important, and Mark just grinned and asked if my raise was enough to finally buy a decent car, like the one he'd been eyeing. I just smiled, paid the check for the whole table, which no one thanked me for, and said, "I'm just glad you all came." They thought I was being humble. In reality, I was already picturing tomorrow morning, picturing them waking up to see my face in the paper, seeing the headline about the project that was already getting national attention. I imagined my dad's face when the family group chat blew up, when everyone from cousins to family friends started congratulating me publicly. That thought was the only thing that kept me calm as I said my goodbyes and drove home that night. Because as much as their words hurt, I realized I was past the point of trying to win them over with arguments or explanations. I was done defending myself. I was done begging them to be proud. They were going to find out who I'd become whether they liked it or not. And the way they treated me tonight was going to make that moment hit even harder. And as I lay in bed, phone buzzing with texts from my coworkers who couldn't wait to see tomorrow's feature, I stared at the ceiling and let myself smile for real. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I set an alarm, but because I was too wired to sleep properly. It felt almost childish, like waking up on Christmas morning as a kid. The sun was barely up, but I could already hear my phone vibrating on the nightstand with notifications. My coworkers were sending me pictures of the paper, tagging me on LinkedIn, posting screenshots on Instagram stories. There it was, my face on the front page of the business section, headline in bold letters. Local project manager leads groundbreaking initiative bringing millions in revenue. The article talked about how I'd taken a failing project and turned it into one of the company's biggest wins in years. There was a photo of me standing with my team, all of us grinning, and a quote they'd pulled where I'd said, "This is just the beginning. We're building something that will outlast all of us." I stared at it for a long time before I finally sent it to the family group chat. No caption, just the picture. Then I set my phone down and waited. The first response came from my aunt, who wasn't even at the party last night. "Luke, front page? We are so proud of you." Then my cousin chimed in. "Bro, this is huge. Can I brag about you to my friends?" The notifications kept coming, but not a single one from my parents or Mark. I knew they'd seen it. My mom had read receipts on, and I could see the little seen icon under my message. Nothing, not even a thumbs up emoji. By mid-morning, I decided to call. Mom answered, her voice as casual as if I'd called to ask what was for dinner. "Oh, hi, Luke. Did you see the paper?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There was a pause. Then she said, "Yes, we saw it. Your father says it's nice, but you know how the media exaggerates things. Don't let it get to your head." I actually laughed out loud. "Exaggerates? Mom, it's literally just reporting the facts. The numbers in there are straight from the quarterly reports." "Well," she said with a sigh, "it's just, you don't want to make your brother feel bad. He's been really stressed about his job lately. Seeing you get all this attention might. I cut her off. Wait, are you seriously worried about how Mark feels right now? Her voice got that clipped, defensive edge I knew too well. You know how sensitive he is, Luke. It's not about you. It's about keeping the peace. Your father and I don't want drama. I bit back everything I wanted to say and just hung up. Not 10 minutes later, Mark texted me privately. Cool article. Guess they'll give those to anyone now. LOL. That was when something in me snapped. I'd been putting up with this for years, letting their words roll off me, trying to stay the bigger person. But now I realized it wasn't about being bigger or smaller. It was about how much I was willing to let them take from me. And right then, it felt like they were trying to take this win away too, trying to dull the shine before I even got a chance to feel proud. The next few days only made things worse. My parents didn't bring it up once. Not when I came over for Sunday dinner. Not when family friends mentioned it in passing. Not when my grandma literally teared up telling me how proud she was. Instead, my dad started making digs about how I must be working too much. You'll burn out soon, he said, like it was inevitable. This whole thing probably won't last. Companies change their minds all the time. Mark, of course, doubled down. He started bragging about how he'd just gotten a small bonus at his job and made sure to say it in front of me, like it was some kind of competition. When our uncle congratulated me at dinner, Mark jumped in with, "Yeah, but Luke barely has a social life anymore. What's the point of money if you don't have anyone to spend it with?" Everyone laughed, everyone except me. It was like they were all in on this unspoken agreement to pull me back down whenever I tried to rise. And the more I stayed quiet, the more they pushed. Then came the text from my mom that nearly sent me over the edge. "Hey, we were thinking, since you're doing so well now, maybe you can help Mark out with his car payment this month. He's had a rough time, and it would mean a lot to us. No congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Just a request for money." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "No." She called me immediately, her voice sharp. "Luke, don't be selfish. Family helps family. You can't just sit on your money while your brother struggles." "I'm not sitting on it," I said. "And I'm not responsible for his bills. He's 25. He can figure it out." Her tone softened, but only slightly. "You know he's not as good with money as you are. We just thought you could step up." I didn't say what I was really thinking. That stepping up was all I'd ever done. That I'd been the one who fixed their leaky roof when they couldn't afford a contractor, who loaned Mark money when he lost his job last year and never saw a cent back, who made sure everyone had nice Christmas presents even when I was broke. I just said, "I'm not doing it," and hung up. That week, the family group chat went suspiciously quiet. No memes from Mark, no updates from Mom about what she was cooking, no passive-aggressive jokes from Dad. Just silence. And instead of feeling guilty, like I might have a few years ago, I felt something else, a strange, buzzing clarity. They were never going to treat me the way I wanted them to just because I asked nicely. They were never going to respect me unless they were forced to. And now, for the first time in my life, I actually had the power to do that. But I didn't act right away. I let the tension sit there, growing heavier each day, until even my friends started to notice. "Dude, what's going on with your family?" one of them asked after I ignored a call from my mom. "Nothing," I said with a smile. "Just letting them show me who they really are." And as the next company event approached, an event where I was going to be speaking in front of reporters, shareholders, and pretty much every big name in the city, I started to think about how I wanted them to see me. Not just as the kid they used to laugh at. Not just as the reliable older son who would always pick up the pieces. I wanted them to see me the way everyone else was starting to see me. And I wanted it to hurt. 2 weeks later, the company hosted its quarterly investor dinner, a big, glossy event at the downtown hotel ballroom. I'd been asked to give a short speech about the project's success and where we were headed next. It was the kind of thing people in my field worked years to get invited to, and now I wasn't just attending, I was one of the speakers. I didn't invite my family, not because I didn't want them there, but because I wanted the moment to belong to me. I wanted to be surrounded by people who actually respected me, people who knew how hard I'd worked. But apparently someone else decided differently. I walked into the ballroom, feeling good for the first time in weeks, and froze. Sitting at one of the round tables near the front were my parents and Mark. My parents were dressed nicely. Mom in one of her special occasion blouses, Dad in the blazer he wore to weddings. Mark, of course, had shown up in a polo and jeans, looking bored. I made my way over, keeping my voice level. What are you doing here? Mom smiled like this was the most normal thing in the world. Your aunt told us about this dinner. We thought it would be nice to support you. Support me. Right. I forced a smile and nodded, then excused myself to mingle with some of my colleagues. For a while, I managed to ignore them. I took photos with the other project leads, chatted with the CEO, and kept reminding myself this was my night. Then it happened. I was standing near the buffet when I heard my father's voice. Loud. Too loud. He was talking to one of the senior partners, someone I'd been trying to impress for months. Oh, Luke's always been the smart one, my dad said. And for a brief, foolish second, I felt a flicker of pride. But then he kept talking. But honestly, he's terrible with people. We were shocked when we heard he got this role. Thought maybe they were just desperate. The partner gave a polite laugh, clearly uncomfortable, but my dad wasn't done. You know, he still calls us all the time asking what to do. We have to keep him grounded, or he'd be unbearable. He can get carried away. I felt my stomach drop, like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I didn't even realize I was moving until I was standing right there, right behind them. The partner looked at me, clearly mortified. My dad just smiled, like nothing was wrong. Luke, we were just talking about you. I forced a tight smile, excused the partner, and pulled my dad aside. What was that? I hissed under my breath. He shrugged. Just making conversation. You don't want these people thinking you're some kind of hotshot. A little humility is good for you. I couldn't even respond. I just walked away, my hands shaking. I didn't think the night could get worse. But then I saw Mark at the bar, talking to two of my coworkers, including the woman I'd been quietly seeing for the past few months. He was laughing, holding court, and I caught just enough of the conversation to make my blood run cold. Oh yeah, Luke's always been kind of awkward. Used to get picked on in high school. Total nerd. I'm actually surprised he even got a girlfriend. Good for him. Though, maybe he won't work himself to death now. They laughed. My girlfriend's smile faltered, like she wasn't sure whether to join in, but Mark just kept going. He's not as smooth as he thinks. I stepped in before he could finish. Mark. Outside. Now. He smirked like this was all a game, but followed me out to the hotel lobby. What are you doing? I demanded. What? He shrugged. Just talking. Relax. Everyone knows you take yourself too seriously. I'm just making you sound relatable. Relatable? You're trashing me in front of my coworkers. He rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. You act like you're some big deal now. We have to keep you grounded. Mom and Dad said the same thing. You've been getting a little full of yourself. That did it. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just looked at him for a long, silent moment and said, You don't get to decide who I am anymore. Then I turned and walked back inside, leaving him standing there with his mouth open. The rest of the night was a blur. I got through my speech, somehow, and people applauded, but it felt hollow. I couldn't stop thinking about what they'd done. They hadn't just embarrassed me. They'd undermined me in front of the very people I needed to trust me. And then came the final blow. The next morning, I got a call from HR. One of the senior partners had filed a note saying he was concerned about my ability to handle pressure because of what he'd heard my father say. Nothing serious, they assured me, but it was a black mark on my record nonetheless, something that would live in my file for months. That was when I stopped trying to play nice. Because in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about last night. It wasn't about the promotion party or the article or even the car payment they wanted me to cover. This was a pattern. They weren't just unsupportive, they were actively sabotaging me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't call them. I didn't text them. I went silent. When they reached out, I ignored them. When Mark sent me a sarcastic meme, I left him on red. And as the days turned into a week, I started to plan. Not revenge. Not yet. But something. Something that would make them see me for who I really was. And finally, painfully, understand what they'd done. The silence was louder than anything they had ever said to me. For the first few days after the investor dinner, I told myself I was just cooling off. That maybe if I took some time away, I'd be able to come back with a clearer head and not let their words get under my skin. But the truth was, I wasn't just cooling off, I was retreating. Pulling back piece by piece from a family I'd spent my whole life trying to keep close. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. At first, Mom texted me in that passive-aggressive way she does. No dinner this week? Grandma was asking about you. I didn't answer. A few hours later, hope you're okay. The next day, Luke, this is getting childish. Just talk to us. But I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to. Because here's what nobody really talks about when it comes to family betrayal. It's not just anger you feel. It's grief. I would wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every little moment from the investor dinner, from the promotion party, from years ago when Dad said I'd never be a people person, when Mom told me not to get my hopes up about college, when Mark laughed at my first car and told everyone at school it was Luke's loser mobile. It was like all those memories had been living under the floorboards of my brain, and now the trapdoor had swung open and they were pouring out all at once. I started staying later at the office, not because I had more work to do, but because I didn't want to go home and sit with those thoughts. I buried myself in spreadsheets, emails, planning sessions. When my team asked if I was okay, I smiled and said I was fine. I don't think any of them bought it, but they respected the space I clearly wanted. The hardest part was my girlfriend. She tried, at first, to get me to open up. One night after work, she came over with takeout and said, gently, "You've been a ghost all week. What's going on?" I almost told her everything. Almost. But instead I said, "It's just work stress. I'll be fine." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She just stayed quiet, ate dinner with me, and left early. After that, she started coming around less. That was when it hit me that my family's words weren't just hurting me. They were bleeding into every other part of my life. My friendships felt thinner, my relationship was strained, and even at work, I caught myself hesitating in meetings, second-guessing my decisions because of that stupid HR note in my file. One night, sitting alone in my apartment with a cold cup of coffee and my laptop open but untouched, I realized I was spiraling. I'd always been the dependable one, the calm one, the one who kept his head when everyone else lost theirs. But right then, I felt anything but calm. I felt like I was standing on a cliff edge, waiting for someone to give me a reason not to jump. And then, something small happened that somehow made everything worse. Grandma called. She almost never called me directly. She usually went through Mom, so when I saw her name on my phone, I picked up immediately. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm and a little shaky. "I just wanted to check on you. Your mother says you've been distant." I hesitated, then said, "Yeah, I guess I have. Are you okay?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her not to worry, but the words got stuck. "I'm figuring some things out," I finally said. There was a pause, then she said quietly, "Luke, you've always been such a good boy, always helping everyone else. But you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep this family warm." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, until I realized I was crying. Not loud, heaving sobs, just silent tears running down my face, like something inside me had cracked open. That was my rock bottom. But rock bottom has a strange clarity to it. Because once you've felt everything break, you realize you have two choices: stay broken or build something new out of the pieces. I started small. I made a list, an actual, physical list, of every time my family had dismissed me, undermined me, or asked me to put them first at my own expense. It was longer than I expected. Then I made another list, every time I'd helped them. Money I'd lent and never gotten back, favors I'd done, emergencies I'd bailed them out of. By the time I was done, I had 3 full pages. And looking at that list, I felt something shift again. Because for the first time, it was all there in black and white. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that I hadn't just been too sensitive. The next step was harder. I started saying no. When Mom texted me asking if I could pick up a new lawnmower for Dad, since you have the bigger car now, I replied, "I can't." When Mark called asking if I could look over his resume because he might apply for a new job, I said, "Sorry, I don't have time right now." Each no felt both terrifying and electric, like I was rewiring some part of my brain that had been stuck in people-pleaser mode for decades. And while I was doing that, I started planning. I didn't know exactly what the end game would look like yet, but I knew I wanted it to be big. Not petty, not cruel, just undeniable. Something that would make them stop in their tracks and finally see me. Every night after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, sketching out ideas, making calls, quietly building towards something I wasn't ready to name out loud. The strange thing was, the more I planned, the lighter I felt. The grief was still there, but now it had somewhere to go. And deep down, I think I already knew. The next time I saw my parents and my brother, things wouldn't be the same. Not ever again. In the weeks that followed, something in me started to change, quietly at first, then all at once. It was like stepping out of a dark, windowless room and realizing the world outside was bigger and brighter than I'd let myself believe. I threw myself into work again, but this time it wasn't about hiding from my family. It was about proving something to myself. I stayed late because I wanted to, not because I was running from the silence in my apartment. I took on more responsibilities, volunteered to lead 2 new projects, and for the first time since the investor dinner, I felt that old fire again, the one that had pushed me to climb this far in the first place. And people noticed. A month after the investor dinner fiasco, my boss called me into his office. I braced myself for bad news. That HR note still gnawed at me late at night. But instead, he smiled. "Luke, the board loved your speech. The partners have been impressed with how you handled the rollout. I know you've had some bumps, but you've really proved yourself these past few weeks." He handed me a document. It was an invitation to an executive retreat, the kind usually reserved for senior leadership. "You're on track for bigger things," he said. "I think it's time you start preparing for what's next." Walking out of that office, I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was the first tangible sign that my career wasn't just surviving. It was accelerating. The HR note hadn't sunk me. My father's comments hadn't crippled my reputation. If anything, I'd climbed higher despite them. Outside of work, my life started to expand, too. I reached out to a few old college friends I hadn't seen in years, grabbed coffee with them, and realized how much I'd missed having people in my life who knew me before all the family drama became the center of everything. We started meeting up on weekends, hikes, game nights, the kind of low-key fun that reminded me who I was outside of being the responsible older brother. Even my relationship, which had been hanging by a thread, started to recover. One evening, after a long day, I sat my girlfriend down and told her everything. The promotion party, the investor dinner, the way my family had been slowly grinding me down for years. She listened, really listened, then took my hand and said, "Luke, you don't have to carry them forever. You get to choose what kind of family you want in your life." It was such a simple statement, but it felt like a door swinging open in my chest. I started taking better care of myself, too. I joined a gym near the office, something I'd been putting off forever, and forced myself to go 3 times a week. At first it was miserable. I was sore, exhausted, and completely uncoordinated. But soon I started to see changes. My shoulders straightened, my energy came back, and people began commenting that I looked different, lighter, stronger. And maybe I did. Because with each small win, each project milestone, each new social plan, each morning I woke up without that tight knot of dread in my chest. I felt like I was reclaiming something I'd lost. Meanwhile, my family seemed increasingly baffled by my distance. Mom sent a few messages trying to guilt me into visiting. "You haven't seen Grandma in weeks. Your father feels hurt that you're ignoring him." But instead of feeling guilty, I felt oddly calm reading them. I wasn't ignoring them to punish them. I was just choosing not to engage until I was ready. Mark tried a different tactic. He sent me a text one Friday night. "Hey, some of us are at the bar if you want to join." I didn't respond. The next day, he followed up, "You're acting weird. Whatever this is about, just get over it." That one made me laugh out loud. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't want to get over it. I wanted to hold on to this clarity for a little while longer. Then, the perfect opportunity came along. Almost like fate was giving me the setup I'd been waiting for. The company announced that the next quarter's results were going to be presented at a public press conference. Not just numbers on a slide deck, an actual event with local reporters, business influencers, and city officials in attendance. And I wasn't just attending. I'd been asked to be one of the keynote speakers, right after the CEO. This wasn't just another investor dinner. This was the kind of event that made headlines, the kind that would get live coverage in the business section's online stream. As soon as I saw the email, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I started preparing my speech meticulously, working with the PR team to make sure it hit every note. I booked a new suit, something sharp and tailored that made me look like I belonged up there on that stage. I even reached out to a photographer to get professional headshots done, something I'd been meaning to do for months, but never made time for. The closer the event got, the more my confidence grew. It wasn't just about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about showing myself how far I'd come. about standing on that stage and knowing that every person in the room, including, hopefully, my parents and brother, would have no choice but to see me differently. Because this time, I was going to make sure they were there. I was going to send them invitations myself, with their names on them, and watch them sit in that audience while I took the stage. And when the cameras flashed, when the reporters scribbled notes, when my words echoed through that room, they were going to know, without me saying a single thing, that the son and brother they used to laugh at wasn't someone they could control anymore. Not with guilt, not with jokes, not with their approval or their silence. For the first time in my life, I was in control of the story, and I was going to make sure it had their full attention. The first thing I did was secure their attendance, but not by asking, and definitely not by begging. I wanted them there because they chose to come, not because I guilt them into it. I needed them to feel like they were walking into just another normal event, not a setup. So I sent a group text to my parents and Mark. Hey, my company is holding a public quarterly conference next month. I'm one of the keynote speakers. There will be food, drinks, the works. Thought you might want to come see what I've been working on. No explanation. No follow-up. Just a clean, simple invitation. Mark replied first. Free food? Guess I can show up. Mom's response came a few minutes later. We'll be there. Your father says it'll be nice to see what you do all day. The subtext was clear. They still thought of this as Luke's little office job, something cute to pat me on the head for. Perfect. With them locked in, I shifted my focus to making the moment as undeniable as possible. The PR team had already been working with me on my speech, but I asked if we could include visuals, not just slides with numbers, but photos of the team, graphs of the revenue growth I'd driven, screenshots of the national coverage we'd received. The communications director lit up. Absolutely, she said. We want this to be a showcase. You're the face of this project now, lean into that. I didn't say it out loud, but inside, I thought exactly. Every night after work, I practiced my speech until I could deliver it without looking at a single card. I watched TED Talks to study how the best speakers commanded a room, how they used pauses and eye contact to hold an audience's attention. I worked on my posture, my breathing, even the way I walked onto the stage. If my family was going to be there, I wasn't just going to give a speech. I was going to own that room. But the setup wasn't just about the event. Around this time, I made a quiet but deliberate move that no one outside of work knew about. I started consulting on the side. Word had spread about my project's success, and a smaller tech startup reached out asking if I'd be willing to advise them on their launch strategy. At first, I hesitated. I was already busy enough, but something about the timing felt right. Within a few weeks, I was spending 2 evenings a week with their team, helping them avoid the pitfalls I'd learned to navigate the hard way. It wasn't glamorous work, but they treated me like I was indispensable, and for the first time, I felt what it was like to be seen as an authority outside of my company. They even offered me equity in exchange for my time. Not a huge percentage, but enough to make me a stakeholder if the company took off. The old me would have kept this to myself, quietly working and waiting for it to pay off before mentioning it to anyone. The new me started documenting the process, not for social media, but for myself. Photos of whiteboards, late-night brainstorming sessions, milestones we hit. I was building a record, proof that everything I was doing was intentional. The more I did this, the more my confidence solidified. I started realizing just how much of my life had been shaped around waiting for my family's approval, and just how little I needed it now. Still, a part of me couldn't help but think about the moment they'd see it all. One evening, about 2 weeks before the conference, I ran into my mom at the grocery store. She smiled in that tight way she does when she's trying to play nice. "Luke," she said, as if she'd just bumped into a casual acquaintance. "We're looking forward to this thing you're doing." I just nodded. "Good. I think you'll enjoy it." Then she added, "Your father was saying maybe you'll finally let us see the office. You know, after the event." It took everything in me not to laugh. My father, who had stood in front of a senior partner and told him I wasn't good with people, now wanted a tour of my workplace like a proud dad. "We'll see," I said with a small smile, because I already knew what was coming after the event, and it was going to be a lot bigger than a casual office tour. Meanwhile, Mark tried to pull his usual routine, asking me a week before the conference if I could spot him a couple hundred, because his car had broken down. This time, I didn't even respond. When he followed up with, "Wow, you really think you're too good for us now?" I simply replied, "No, I just have other priorities. It was a short text, but it felt like a line being drawn in permanent marker. And just to make sure there were no surprises, I quietly asked the event organizers to reserve seats for my family, right near the front, where they'd have the clearest view of the stage and the screens. I even had name cards printed for them, something usually reserved for city officials and board members. When the day of the conference finally arrived, everything felt sharper: the air, the lights, even my own heartbeat. I stood backstage in my new suit, holding the microphone in one hand and my note cards in the other, though I didn't need them anymore. From where I stood, I could see the audience filling in. My parents arrived first, looking around like tourists, followed by Mark, who had clearly tried to dress up, but still looked like he was going to a casual dinner. They found their seats, right where I'd planned for them to be, and I could see my father's expression change slightly when he realized how close they were to the front. Good. I wanted him close. I wanted him to hear every word. When my name was announced, I walked on stage to polite applause and saw my mom lift her phone like she was going to take a video. That was the moment it hit me. They had no idea what they were about to witness. And that thought didn't make me nervous. It made me ready, because I hadn't just prepared a speech. I'd prepared a statement, one that was going to make it impossible for them to dismiss me ever again. When they called my name, the applause felt like a wave pushing me forward. I walked out into the bright lights of the ballroom, feeling my polished shoes hit the stage with a steady rhythm, the microphone warm in my hand. For a split second, I locked eyes with my parents. Mom had that practiced, neutral expression she used when she didn't want to be caught looking too impressed. Dad sat back with his arms crossed, already skeptical, like he was waiting for me to trip. Mark was scrolling on his phone, not even pretending to pay attention. Perfect. I stepped up to the podium and started with the formalities, thanking the board, the investors, the team. My voice was steady, clear. But then I shifted. I spoke about the project as more than just a set of numbers. I told the story of how it had started: a failing department, a skeleton crew of discouraged employees, and a budget that was on the verge of being cut entirely. I described the long nights, the hard decisions, and how we had turned it around, not just surviving, but thriving. As I spoke, the big screens behind me flashed through the photos we'd carefully chosen: team meetings, product milestones, headlines from the national feature, and finally, the graph. A clean upward curve showing how the project had grown under my leadership. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that means people are actually listening. Then I did something I hadn't told PR I was going to do. I stepped away from the podium and let my voice drop just enough to sound personal. When I first started working on this project, I said, there were a lot of people who thought it was doomed. Some even said I wasn't the right person for the job. But here's the thing about being underestimated: it either crushes you, or it turns you into someone who refuses to quit. I chose the second option. I let that hang for a moment, scanning the audience until my eyes landed right on my dad. He was sitting up straighter now, his arms uncrossed, his expression no longer casual. Mark had finally put his phone down. I continued, calm but deliberate. This isn't just about me, I said. It's about every person in this room who has ever been told they weren't enough, that they were too quiet, too ambitious, too idealistic. If you've ever been doubted, take this as proof that you can turn it around. You can build something people once thought was impossible. The room broke into applause, not the polite kind this time, but the real, sustained kind that makes your chest tighten. I glanced at my family again. My mom was no longer recording. She was staring at me, her lips pressed together like she wasn't sure how to react. My dad was watching intently now, his jaw tight. Mark looked uncomfortable. Good, because this was the point of no return. I wrapped up my talk by announcing the project's newest expansion, a partnership with a national brand that would bring in millions over the next fiscal year. The announcement had been embargoed until today, so when I said it, the room buzzed with surprise. Cameras flashed, reporters started scribbling, and for a brief moment, it felt like the entire world was watching me. I smiled. We've come a long way, I said, and we're just getting started. When I stepped off the stage, the applause followed me all the way down. Several executives shook my hand, and a few investors even stopped me to say they wanted to discuss future opportunities. I knew my family was watching every second of this. When the presentation ended and the networking portion began, I let them come to me. Mom approached first, her expression a mix of pride and discomfort. That was impressive, Luke, she said carefully. I just nodded. Thanks. Dad was next. He didn't smile, but he didn't look dismissive either. You really got them listening, he said, as if he were surprised. That was the idea, I replied evenly. Then came Mark, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes darting everywhere but my face. You looked like you knew what you were doing up there, he said finally, like the words cost him something. I didn't rub it in. I didn't gloat. I just smiled slightly and said, I do. Then I turned back to the cluster of executives waiting to speak with me. Because the truth was, this wasn't about winning their approval anymore. This was about making them witness it, making them sit there, front and center, and see what I had built without their help, in spite of their doubt. By the time the night ended, it was clear the dynamic had shifted. People were coming up to me all evening, shaking my hand, asking for my card, treating me like someone who mattered. My parents saw it, Mark saw it, and for once, they didn't have anything clever to say. When we finally parted ways in the parking lot, Mom gave me a quick hug. We'll talk soon, she said softly, like she wasn't quite sure what the new rules were anymore. I just nodded and watched them walk away, feeling strangely calm. Because the revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't a screaming match or a dramatic public shaming. It was simply forcing them to sit there and see me succeed, and realizing they couldn't minimize it, couldn't explain it away, couldn't take it from me. And I wasn't done yet. Because if they thought tonight was the peak, they were about to learn this was just the beginning. The days after the conference felt like living in a different reality. My inbox flooded with follow-ups from investors and executives, invitations to speak at smaller events, and even a couple of headhunters wanting to know if I was open to new opportunities. For the first time in my career, I wasn't chasing things. Things were chasing me. But the real shift happened with my family. It started with a message from my mom the morning after the event. Your father and I were talking last night. We didn't realize how big a deal this was. We're proud of you. No emojis. No passive-aggressive undertone. Just a plain, simple statement. If this had been a year ago, I probably would have clung to that message like a starving man to bread. But now, I just stared at it for a moment, then typed back. Thanks. I appreciate that. I left it at that. A day later, Mark called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Look, he started, awkward as ever. I know I give you a hard time. But that was actually pretty cool. What you did. Everyone was talking about it after you left. I didn't respond right away, so he kept going. I didn't know you were working on something that big. Guess I thought, I don't know, that you were just doing the same old boring stuff. It wasn't boring, I said quietly. I know, he admitted. There was a long pause, then, I think I might try to get serious about my job. You know, stop messing around. I almost laughed at the irony. Years of them telling me I was the one who needed to be humbled, and now Mark was the one having an epiphany. Good idea, I said simply. It's about time. When Sunday rolled around, I decided to show up for dinner, not because I felt guilty, but because I wanted to see them face to face now that everything had shifted. The moment I walked in, I could feel it. The atmosphere was different. No snide comments about work. No backhanded jokes. My dad actually stood up from the couch, clapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Beer's in the fridge if you want one." Mom fussed over the food, offering me the first plate instead of giving it to Mark. Even my brother was quieter, more thoughtful, like he was trying to figure out where he fit in this new version of things. And I didn't gloat. I didn't throw their past words back in their faces. I just sat at the table, calm and steady, and let them come to me. Halfway through the meal, my dad cleared his throat. I was wrong, he said simply. The whole table went silent. About what I said at the dinner. About what I said to your partner. You're not the same kid you used to be. I looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. I know. He nodded back, like that was enough, and for once it was. Because the power wasn't in their apology. It was in knowing I didn't need it to feel whole. After dinner, I stepped outside, breathing in the cool air, feeling something in my chest loosen for the first time in months. My phone buzzed, a message from the startup I'd been consulting for. Big news, funding round closed. You officially own 3% of the company. Congrats, partner. I couldn't help but laugh. There it was, the final piece. Because while my family was just now realizing who I'd become, I was already 2 steps ahead, building something even bigger. When I walked back inside, Mom asked what I was smiling about. Oh, I said casually, slipping my phone back into my pocket. just thinking about how next quarter's going to be even better. They didn't ask what I meant, but I saw the look on their faces, that flicker of realization that I was no longer the person they could keep small. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain. I just grabbed my jacket, said goodnight, and left them sitting there, quietly wondering how much more there was about me they didn't know yet. And that, I realized as I got in my car, was the best revenge of all, because they finally saw me, really saw me, and there was no going back. I smiled to myself, started the engine, and drove away, leaving them to sit with that thought. This time, I wasn't the one who had to catch up. They were, and they knew it. I'm Ben, 34, and I've always been the responsible one in the family. You know the type. The guy who never forgets birthdays, remembers everyone's shoe size, and is somehow expected to fix every crisis because Ben will handle it. My younger brother, Kyle, has always been the opposite. He's the charming failure, the one who shows up late to Christmas with a big grin and no gifts, and somehow everyone laughs it off because that's just Kyle. This year, I thought we had finally found a system that worked for everyone. Back in September, Kyle and I made a deal. I'd handle Christmas for his 2 kids, my nephews, and he'd take care of my son, Max. Simple, right? Fair. And honestly, I was relieved. I love my nephews, but Christmas shopping for 3 kids can get expensive fast. This way, we'd both just focus on one set of gifts, and everyone would have a great morning. I took the deal seriously. I started early, found out exactly what my nephews wanted, the bikes they'd been begging for, the video game they wouldn't stop talking about, new winter coats that actually fit. I didn't cut corners. I spent nearly $1,800 in total because I wanted them to light up when they opened those boxes. Max and I even wrapped everything together, and he was so excited to see his cousins' faces. But I had this nagging feeling. Kyle never mentioned what he was getting for Max. Whenever I'd casually ask, he'd brush me off with a laugh and say, "Oh, don't worry. I've got something special planned." I wanted to believe him. I wanted this Christmas to be normal. Max is 9 now, old enough to notice when he's being left out, and after last year, when Kyle completely forgot to get him anything until New Year's Eve, I just couldn't stomach the idea of it happening again. Christmas morning came. We drove over to my parents' house, loaded down with gifts. I even brought extra coffee for everyone because, well, I'm that guy. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and pine needles. Carols were playing softly in the background. It was perfect. Max was bouncing with excitement as we all sat down around the tree. Kyle and his wife were already there with their boys, sipping cocoa like it was just another morning. We started handing out gifts. The boys tore into the boxes I'd spent months curating, and their faces lit up exactly the way I'd hoped. "Uncle Ben, this is awesome," one of them shouted, and for a second, my heart felt full. Then it was Max's turn. Kyle grinned, reached into a small bag, and handed Max a single, flat, badly wrapped box. My stomach dropped. Max peeled the paper off slowly, probably expecting a gift card or maybe a game disc. Instead, he held up a cheap, neon green plastic whistle, the kind you'd find in a party favor bag at a dollar store. There was this awful silence. Max stared at it like he didn't understand. My parents looked away. Kyle shrugged and said, "Sorry, man. Money's tight this year." I felt my ears ringing. Tight. He and his wife had just gotten back from a week-long ski trip in Colorado. They had matching jackets on right now that probably cost more than my car payment. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Max's little hands tightened around that whistle, and he went quiet. Not crying, not complaining, just quiet. That was somehow worse than if he'd thrown a tantrum. I stood up without a word, walked to the tree, and started picking up every single box I'd brought. The bikes, the games, the coats, all of it. My mom asked, "Ben, what are you doing?" But I didn't answer. I loaded everything back into my truck while Kyle kept saying, "Whoa, chill. It's not that big a deal." When the last gift was gone, I snapped a quick photo of the empty tree, got in the truck, and sent a single text to the family group chat. "Deal's off." Max sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. The whistle was still in his hand. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up with notifications. Kyle had sent a wall of messages. Everything from "you're overreacting" to "you ruined Christmas for everyone." Then came the call. "You better bring those gifts back right now," he barked. "My kids are crying." I didn't answer. I just set the phone down on the counter, made Max some hot chocolate, and tried to swallow the knot in my throat. It was almost noon when the pounding started on my front door. The pounding on my door rattled the whole house. Max flinched and looked at me, wide-eyed, like he wasn't sure if he was in trouble. I put a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "You're not in trouble, buddy." Then I stood there, listening to my brother shout from the porch, "Ben, open the door. You can't just take their gifts like some kind of psycho. You ruined Christmas. This is your fault." I didn't move. Not right away. My stomach was a tight knot, my pulse thudding in my ears. Max was sitting at the kitchen counter now, blowing gently on his hot chocolate, silent as stone. When Kyle's yelling didn't stop, I finally walked to the door and cracked it just enough to look him in the eye. He was red-faced, practically foaming. "You're going to bring those gifts back?" he said, not even bothering to say hello. "No," I said simply. That one word seemed to set him off. He threw his hands up, pacing back and forth on my porch like a man possessed. "You can't punish my kids for this." "I'm not punishing your kids," I said, my voice calm but shaking a little from how hard I was holding myself together. "I'm done being taken advantage of. We had a deal, Kyle." I held up my end. "You didn't." He scoffed like I was being ridiculous. "It's not a big deal. It's just Christmas. You're being dramatic." Behind him, his wife appeared, arms crossed, wearing that expression that always made me feel like I was 12 years old again and in trouble. "This is really selfish of you, Ben," she said sharply. "You're teaching Max to hold grudges. He's going to grow up bitter if you act like this." Something about that, being accused of teaching my kid to be bitter when all I'd done was try to make sure he felt included, made me feel this heavy, hot anger in my chest. "I'm teaching my son that he deserves to be treated fairly," I said, my voice low. "And if that means saying no to being taken advantage of, then that's exactly what I'll teach him." Kyle opened his mouth to argue again, but I shut the door before he could get another word out. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the group text messages. "Mom, Ben, just bring the gifts back. Your nephews are crying. This isn't about you. Kyle, you're a jerk for doing this. You ruined the day. Dad, be the bigger person, son." I stared at those messages until the words blurred. Not one of them asked how Max felt. Not one of them even acknowledged that he had been humiliated, that he had sat there holding a dollar store whistle while his cousins got everything they wanted. Max finally spoke, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "Dad, was I bad this year?" It felt like someone had punched me. I knelt next to him, gripping his shoulders. "No, you were amazing this year. This isn't about you doing anything wrong. This is about people being unfair." "Okay." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite believe me. By late afternoon, the messages had shifted from guilt-tripping to outright threats. "Kyle, you think you can just keep those gifts? That's stealing. Mom, you're embarrassing the family. Everyone is upset. Kyle, if you don't bring them back, we're done. Don't bother coming tomorrow." Tomorrow was supposed to be the big family dinner. Prime rib, homemade pies, the works. Max had been looking forward to it for weeks. I just texted back, "Then we won't be there." That was apparently the final straw. The phone rang again. This time it was Dad. I answered, because if I didn't, he'd just keep calling. "Ben," he said without preamble, his voice clipped, "you're going to return those gifts. Right now." "I'm not," I said. "This isn't how we handle things in this family." I almost laughed. "How we handle things? You mean how we sweep everything under the rug and pretend it's fine until it happens again next year?" "Your brother is having a hard time," Dad said, his tone softening slightly, like I was supposed to pity him. "He's under a lot of stress financially." I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Is that why he went skiing last month?" There was a pause. "That's none of your business." Funny, because apparently it's everyone's business what I do with my money. I shot back. "Ben," Dad said, in that weary, disappointed tone he had perfected over the years, "you're being petty." And just like that, the conversation was over. The rest of the evening was quiet, but not peaceful. Max stayed close to me, quiet but watchful, like he was waiting for me to blow up. I didn't. I made us grilled cheese sandwiches, put on a movie, and tried to pretend it was just another night. But my phone kept lighting up on the counter. More messages. Cousins, aunts, even grandma chiming in. "Ben, don't punish the kids. Maybe just bring back one of the gifts. You're acting like a child." Not a single person mentioned Max. Not a single person asked what he had gotten. It was like he didn't exist to them unless I was buying him matching pajamas for the family photo. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Max sitting under that tree, holding that whistle, trying not to look disappointed. I thought about all the years I'd been bending over backward to make Christmas magical for everyone, even when money was tight for me. The time I picked up the slack when Kyle forgot to buy anything at all. The year I paid for half of Christmas dinner because Mom said she couldn't afford the ham. And still, somehow, I was the villain now. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Mom. Dinner is still at 4. Please come, but leave the drama at home. I stared at it for a long time. Drama. That was what she called standing up for my son. By noon, the group chat had exploded again. Kyle posted a photo of his kids sitting sadly by the empty tree, the same one I'd taken a picture of yesterday, with the caption, "Thanks, Uncle Ben." Family members were commenting with sad emojis and poor boys. I realized then that this wasn't going to blow over. If anything, it was getting worse. Kyle was spinning the story to make me look like some kind of Grinch, and everyone was eating it up. Max was sitting at the table drawing when he looked up and asked, "Are we going to Grandma's?" I hesitated. I could already imagine what would happen if we walked in there. The looks, the whispers, the way Kyle would smirk like he'd won. But before I could answer, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a pounding. It was a slow, deliberate knock, like whoever was out there wasn't in a rush. When I opened it, Kyle was standing there again, but this time, he wasn't yelling. He was smiling. And that, somehow, was worse. Kyle stood there on my porch with that fake calm smile, like he'd just dropped by for coffee. His hands were shoved into his jacket pockets, and he tilted his head like he was the reasonable one in this situation. "Hey man," he said lightly, almost too lightly. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part of me, the part that still clung to the idea that maybe we could fix this, stepped aside and let him in. Max was still at the kitchen table, head bent over his drawing, but I could see his eyes flicking up to watch us carefully. Kyle leaned against the counter like he owned the place, letting out a little chuckle. "Look, yesterday got heated. I think we can both admit that." "Sure," I said flatly. "And, you know, Christmas is supposed to be about forgiveness, right? About family." He spread his hands like he was the peacekeeper here. I crossed my arms. "Say what you came to say, Kyle." His grin widened just a little, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Okay," he said casually. "So here's the deal. I talked to Mom and Dad this morning, and we all agreed. You can bring the gifts back, and we'll forget this ever happened. Water under the bridge." I just stared at him. "That's not happening." The smile slipped, just a fraction. "Ben, be reasonable. My kids are heartbroken, and my son was humiliated." Kyle sighed like I was being dramatic again. "You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. It was a misunderstanding." "No," I said, my voice harder now. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was you not holding up your end of a deal." Again, his eyes narrowed just slightly. "Fine, if that's how you want to play it." He pulled out his phone and tapped something on the screen. A second later, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up and saw what he'd sent, a screenshot of a post on Facebook. My heart dropped. It was my picture, the one I had taken yesterday of the empty tree. Except now it had been shared in our family Facebook group with Kyle's caption plastered over it. "Thanks to my brother, my kid's Christmas morning looked like this. He took every single gift back because he didn't think we did enough for his son." I guess some people care more about money than family. In the comments, there were already dozens. "Ah, those poor boys. Wow, Ben, really? Couldn't you just let it go for one day? This is so sad. Those kids didn't deserve this." Every single one of them assuming I was the villain. Not a single person asking why I'd done it. Kyle watched my face and smiled, like he was satisfied with my reaction. "People deserve to know the kind of stunt you pulled," he said smoothly. "That's not what happened, and you know it." "Doesn't matter," he said with a shrug. "That's what they believe. You want to be stubborn? Go ahead. Just know you're the one tearing this family apart." It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Max slid off his chair and came to stand beside me, clutching my hand. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice small. I looked down at him and then back at Kyle. "You need to leave," I said. "Not until we work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I snapped, louder this time. "You broke the deal. You humiliated my son. And now you're trying to turn everyone against me for calling you out on it. So get out of my house." Kyle's smile finally faltered. "You really want to do this? Make me the bad guy." "You did that yourself," I said coldly. For a second, I thought he might actually argue, but then he just shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked out, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing. Max tugged on my sleeve. "Dad, everyone thinks you're mean." I knelt down so we were eye level. "I know, buddy. But you know the truth. And I know the truth. That's what matters right now." He nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. By mid-afternoon, things had somehow gotten worse. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, voicemails, even a few emails from relatives I barely spoke to. Word had spread beyond just our immediate family. People I hadn't seen in years were chiming in, offering unsolicited advice about forgiveness and family unity. Then came the kicker. Mom called again. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Ben," she said, her voice tight, "I just want you to know that we're still having dinner tonight, but we're not going to let this ruin the day for everyone else. Kyle and his family will be there, and I expect you to apologize when you walk in." I actually laughed, short and humorless. Apologize? For what? For keeping my word when Kyle didn't keep his. For making a scene, she snapped. For hurting your nephews. What about Max? I asked, my voice cracking just a little. What about what they did to him? There was a pause, and then she said, "He'll get over it." Something in me went ice cold. "He'll get over it." I repeated. "Ben," Mom said, her tone softening, "he's a kid. They don't remember this stuff." That was when I realized we weren't just dealing with Kyle's selfishness. This was bigger. This was the entire family deciding that my kids' feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. Max had gone back to drawing, humming under his breath like nothing had happened, but I could feel this heavy weight settling on my chest. At 4 o'clock sharp, I got another text from Dad. "If you're coming to dinner, be polite. Don't bring this up again. Let it go." I didn't reply. I didn't tell Max to get ready, either. Instead, I sat there, waiting, because I knew in my gut this wasn't over yet. And I was right. Around 5:30, another car pulled into my driveway. This time, it wasn't just Kyle. It was my parents. And they weren't smiling. When I saw my parents get out of the car, my first instinct was to tell Max to go to his room. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because I didn't want him to hear whatever was about to happen. He didn't argue. He just grabbed his drawing and padded down the hall, closing his door softly behind him. By the time I opened the front door, Mom and Dad were already halfway up the steps. Mom's face was pinched and tight, the way it always got when she thought I was acting out. Dad looked like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom, calm, serious, the voice of authority. "Ben," Mom said before I could even get a word out, "this has gone far enough." I crossed my arms. "I told you we weren't coming to dinner." "That's exactly why we're here," Dad said, his tone low and controlled. "You can't just sit here sulking while the whole family is trying to have a nice evening. You need to fix this." I felt my jaw tighten. Fix what exactly? Kyle broke the deal. My son got a plastic whistle while I spent almost $2,000 on his kids. And somehow I'm the one who needs to fix it. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're making this all about money," she said sharply. "Christmas isn't about gifts. It's about family. And right now you're tearing this family apart over a few toys." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. A few toys? Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about the gifts, Mom. This is about respect. About my son being treated like he matters. Mom rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." Dad stepped forward then, his voice softer but somehow more cutting. "Son, you need to let this go. You're embarrassing yourself." There it was again, that word. Embarrassing. Petty. Dramatic. Somehow, standing up for my kid was always framed as a character flaw. I could feel the anger boiling under my skin, but I swallowed it down. Losing my temper would just prove their point. "We're not coming to dinner," I said evenly. "That's my final answer." Mom's face darkened. "Then don't bother coming tomorrow either," she snapped. "Or next week. Or New Year's. If you're going to hold this grudge, maybe it's better if you stay away until you can be civil." Something in my chest twisted. It wasn't that I loved family dinners. Half the time I left them feeling more drained than when I arrived. But hearing her say that, hearing her so casually threaten to cut us out, hit harder than I expected. "You're really okay with not seeing your grandson?" I asked quietly. Mom didn't even flinch. "That's up to you." I just nodded once. "Then I guess that's it." They stood there for a moment, maybe expecting me to back down, to cave the way I always had before. When I didn't, Dad sighed like I had disappointed him personally and turned back toward the car. Mom followed, muttering under her breath about how stubborn I was. I closed the door, locked it, and just stood there for a long time, my forehead resting against the wood. The house felt painfully quiet. I finally went to check on Max. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed, his drawing abandoned beside him, staring at the floor. When he looked up at me, his eyes were big and wet, but he wasn't crying. "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us?" he asked softly. My throat felt tight. "They're just upset right now," I said carefully. "But that's not your fault. None of this is your fault." He nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. I sat down beside him, and for a while we just sat there in silence. I wanted to tell him everything. How unfair it was, how tired I was of always being the one to compromise. But he was just a kid. He didn't need my anger on top of his own disappointment. That night, after Max finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the glow of the Christmas tree we'd set up in our own house. The gifts I'd taken back were piled neatly in the corner, still wrapped. I'd meant what I said when I told Kyle the deal was off, but now I wasn't sure what to do with them. Return them? Donate them? Give them to Max? Everywhere I turned, I felt trapped. If I returned them, I'd be out the money and my nephews would still think I was the villain. If I gave them to the boys later, it would look like I'd caved. And then there was Max. I couldn't let him think this was normal. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from one of my aunts, someone I hadn't talked to in months. I heard what happened. "You need to apologize, Ben. Family is all we have." I stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone face down on the table. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was about years of being expected to shoulder the responsibility for keeping the family happy. I was the one who always brought the extra side dish, the one who always offered to help clean up, the one who quietly paid for things when someone else forgot their wallet. And every time I did it, I told myself it was for Max, so he could grow up feeling like he had a big, loving family around him. But sitting there in the quiet, I realized something. All that effort hadn't made them love him more. It had just taught them that they could take from us without giving anything back. That thought hurt more than anything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there, staring at the gifts, running through every memory of the past few years, every slight and every ignored birthday, every time I'd been told I was too sensitive or overreacting. By morning, I knew one thing. I was done playing the role they'd written for me. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but for the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me, because I realized that I didn't have to keep showing up just to be treated like an afterthought. I didn't have to teach Max to accept that, either. That morning, instead of getting ready for another tense round of holiday drama, I made pancakes. We ate breakfast together with Christmas music playing softly in the background. Max laughed when I flipped one wrong and it landed half on the counter. For a moment, it almost felt like we had shaken off the weight of everything. But then my phone buzzed again. Kyle had posted another photo, this time of him and his kids at dinner, surrounded by relatives, all smiling and holding up their presents. The caption read, "Some people try to ruin Christmas, but we still made it great. Family first." And just like that, the calm turned into something else. Not anger exactly. Resolve. I didn't respond to Kyle's post. Not a single word. In fact, I muted the family group chat entirely that morning. No more alerts. No more guilt-tripping notifications lighting up my phone like an alarm bell. The silence was strangely liberating. Max and I spent the rest of the holidays doing our own thing. We went ice skating at the local rink, just the two of us. We grabbed pizza and watched a marathon of his favorite superhero movies. We even baked cookies from scratch, though half of them came out burnt, and we laughed so hard we almost cried. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I started to realize something. It felt good. It felt good not bending over backward for everyone else. It felt good not rushing around, trying to meet everyone's expectations, just focusing on my kid and our own happiness. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for years. But it wasn't just emotional. With all the time and money I wasn't spending on smoothing things over with the family, I had bandwidth for other things I'd been putting off. That week, I finally updated my resume and applied for a promotion at work that I'd been too nervous to go for. It was a long shot, a management position overseeing a team twice the size of mine, but I figured, why not? To my surprise, my boss called me into his office 2 days later. "Ben," he said, glancing at the papers in front of him, "I have to say, I'm impressed. Your numbers are consistently among the best in the department. You've been taking on extra projects for months, and you've been mentoring the new hires without being asked. We've noticed." I tried to play it cool, but my heart was pounding. "You're one of the top candidates," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The final decision will be made next week, but I'd start thinking about who you'd want on your team." I left that office feeling 10 feet tall. That night, Max and I went out for burgers to celebrate. He grinned at me across the table, ketchup on his cheek, and said, "Dad, you're smiling more now." It stopped me in my tracks. "Yeah," I said, pretending to be casual. "Yeah," he nodded seriously. "You used to look tired all the time." That hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I had been tired, bone-deep tired, from constantly giving more than I got, from fighting battles that no one even acknowledged. But now, for the first time, I felt like I was taking my life back. The next morning, I started making quiet changes. I called the bike shop where I'd bought my nephew's new bikes and explained the situation. The owner, a kind older guy who'd seen everything, gave me store credit for the full amount. "Better they go to someone who appreciates them," he said with a wink. With that credit, I bought Max the mountain bike he'd been dreaming about for months. When I wheeled it into the living room, his jaw dropped. "For me?" he asked, like he couldn't believe it. "For you," I said, ruffling his hair. He was outside riding it within 10 minutes, whooping with joy as he tore up and down the driveway. The sound of his laughter was like medicine. Word must have gotten back to the family, maybe through one of the cousins who stalked my social media, because a few days later, Kyle sent me a curt text. "Real classy, Ben. Buying your kid a new bike just to rub it in." I stared at it for a second and then deleted it without replying. I didn't need his approval anymore. As the new year rolled in, I leaned harder into this new way of living. I started taking better care of myself, eating real meals instead of scarfing down whatever was left after Max ate, going for runs in the morning, even joining a gym. And with every little thing I did for myself, the anger I'd been carrying started to shift into something else. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, but clarity. I started to see the family patterns for what they were, cycles that repeated year after year because no one dared break them. Kyle would drop the ball, Mom would excuse it, Dad would tell me to be the bigger person, and I would cave, teaching everyone that it was okay to keep doing it. Not this time. For the first time, I wasn't rushing to patch things up. I wasn't scrambling to make the family whole again. I was letting the fracture sit there. And that was when I realized something powerful. The world didn't fall apart just because I stopped holding it up. If anything, my own little world, the one that actually mattered, was stronger than ever. Then the promotion came through. When HR called to make it official, I almost didn't believe them. Not only had I gotten the job, but the raise that came with it was bigger than I'd imagined. Enough that I could finally start a college fund for Max, enough that we could take a real vacation that summer, just the two of us. When I told Max, he threw his arms around me and shouted, "We should go to the beach." So we planned it, just like that. No group texts, no asking if the dates worked for anyone else. Just me and my son deciding what we wanted and doing it. Meanwhile, the family kept trying to bait me back in. There were texts about birthday parties, about a cousin's baby shower, even about an intervention dinner where we could all talk this out. I didn't go, and the more I stayed away, the clearer everything became. I started hearing things, little bits of gossip that made their way to me through mutual friends. How Kyle had been complaining that without me around, he had to buy all his own groceries for family dinners now. How Mom had been griping that she had to host Easter without my help this year, and it just wasn't the same. A small, grim satisfaction settled in my chest every time I heard it. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because it meant they were finally feeling the gap I'd left. And somewhere deep down, I started to wonder if maybe this wasn't just about drawing boundaries anymore. Maybe it was about teaching them a lesson they wouldn't forget. The kind of lesson that would make them think twice before ever treating Max, or me, like an afterthought again. By spring, I was in the best shape I'd been in years, in a better job, and in a stronger place mentally. I had new routines, new confidence, and a new sense of control, which meant when the family came knocking again, this time about a big summer reunion they were planning, I was ready and calm. Because for the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was thinking ahead, and I had an idea. When the text about the summer reunion came through, I almost ignored it like I had all the others. But this one was different. It wasn't just another casual invite. It was a full event announcement, with dates, a location, and even a spreadsheet link with who's bringing what. The reunion was going to be big. Cousins flying in from out of state, rented cabins near the lake, a whole weekend of barbecues, campfires, and family bonding. Normally, I'd have been the one coordinating half of it, organizing meals, making sure everyone had enough bedding. But this time, I wasn't asked to plan anything, just to bring dessert. That alone was telling. At first, I thought about declining, but then I remembered what I'd been telling myself for months. No more caving, no more appeasing. And part of me realized that if I didn't go, I'd just be leaving the narrative in their hands, letting them keep painting me as the bitter one, the difficult one, the Grinch. If I was going to reclaim the story, I'd have to show up on my own terms. So I texted back, short and simple. Max and I will be there. And then I started planning. The first thing I did was look closer at that spreadsheet link they'd sent. It wasn't locked. Anyone with the link could edit it, which meant I could see not just what everyone was bringing, but who was paying for what, who had reserved which cabin, even which family members were splitting costs. And that's when I noticed something that made my eyebrows go up. Kyle had booked the largest cabin, the one right on the lake with the private fire pit, but he hadn't paid the deposit yet. In fact, the spreadsheet still showed a big, glaring pending in red next to his name. The note said payment was due in 2 weeks. Interesting. A couple of quiet conversations with people I trusted, my cousin Mark, who had no patience for Kyle's antics, revealed even more. Apparently, Kyle had been bragging about how he was getting a deal on the cabin because Mom and Dad were covering part of it as a thank you for all the work he'd done helping organize the reunion. Helping organize? I nearly laughed out loud. Kyle hadn't organized a thing in his life. But that was when an idea started to form. At work, I just finished a leadership course about negotiating and influencing. One of the biggest takeaways had been, use the power you have, not the power you wish you had. And right now, I had 2 things I hadn't had before: financial breathing room and leverage. Over the next few days, I quietly reached out to the owner of the rental cabins, a local guy named Rick, who answered his own phone. I explained that I was part of the reunion group and asked about availability. As it turned out, the big lakefront cabin Kyle had claimed was the last one of its size available for that weekend. So if someone doesn't pay the deposit, I asked carefully. Rick chuckled. Then it goes back on the market. First come, first served. Good to know, I said, my mind already turning. I didn't book anything yet. I wasn't going to be reckless. But I marked the payment deadline on my calendar and started watching the spreadsheet like a hawk. Meanwhile, life kept getting better in other areas. My new team at work was thriving under my leadership, and I was starting to get noticed at higher levels of the company. Max was doing great in school and had joined a local soccer team, which meant we were spending our Saturdays at games, cheering until we were hoarse. It was a good season, but I never forgot what had happened. And every time I saw Kyle's smug posts about how family is everything, or Mom's passive-aggressive memes about forgiveness, it reminded me why I was waiting, why I was planning. About a week before the cabin payment was due, Kyle texted me out of the blue. Hey man, you're still bringing dessert, right? Don't cheap out this time, lol. The nerve. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Rick back and asked about the cabin again. Still available? I asked. Yep, he said. Still pending payment. Great, I said, my voice calm. Put me down for it. I paid the full deposit over the phone, got the confirmation email, and quietly waited. 2 days later, the spreadsheet updated. The red, pending, next to Kyle's name had been replaced with a bright yellow, booking lost. And right below it, in green, was my name. The group chat blew up almost immediately. Wait, what happened to the lake cabin? Ben, did you book this? Kyle, did you forget to pay again? Kyle's response came quickly, full of fury. What the heck, Ben? That was our cabin. I typed back, calm as ever. It wasn't paid for. I booked it so Max and I would have a place to stay. See you at the lake. There was a flurry of angry emojis and accusations, but I didn't take the bait. I just let them rage while I pictured Kyle pacing his kitchen, trying to figure out what to do. The other cabins were already full, which meant he'd have to find lodging somewhere off-site or cancel. And that was just step 1. Over the next week, I made sure everything for the reunion weekend was handled perfectly on my end. Max and I got matching new swim gear, packed our favorite snacks, and even bought a small fire pit grill for Esmores. If Kyle thought I was going to show up sulking, he had another thing coming. The day before the reunion, I got a text from my cousin Mark. "Just so you know, Kyle's been telling everyone you stole the cabin on purpose to humiliate him." I smiled at my phone. "Good," I texted back, because humiliation wasn't even the half of what I had planned. The day of the reunion dawned bright and warm, the kind of summer morning that smells like sunscreen and lake water. Max was practically vibrating with excitement as we packed up the truck. The cabin confirmation had felt like winning a battle, but this weekend was the war. I told myself over and over that this wasn't about getting even. It was about setting the record straight, about showing my son and everyone else that we weren't doormats. When we arrived at the lake, I almost laughed at how perfect the timing was. The cabins were clustered close enough that you couldn't miss each other coming and going. Kyle and his family had just pulled up and were unloading their car. Except instead of heading to the lakefront cabin they'd been bragging about, they were dragging suitcases toward one of the small, overflow cottages way in the back, the kind usually rented to last-minute guests or fishermen passing through. Kyle saw me get out of the truck, and his face went red instantly. "Wow," he said loudly, loud enough for half the family to hear. "Look who decided to show up after months of sulking." I smiled pleasantly. "Hey, Kyle, glad you made it." He opened his mouth to say something else, probably something cutting, but I just walked past him, Max at my side, and unlocked the door to the big lakefront cabin. The look on Kyle's face when he realized exactly where we were staying was priceless. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. Inside, the cabin was perfect. Big windows overlooking the water, a stone fireplace, enough room for Max to run around and explore. As we unpacked, I noticed that my hands weren't shaking. Months ago, I'd have been bracing for confrontation, dreading the inevitable drama. But now, I felt strangely calm. That evening was the big family cookout. Everyone gathered near the lake, kids splashing in the shallows, aunts and uncles setting up folding chairs. When Max and I walked down with our cooler, heads turned. Conversations quieted just slightly, the kind of quiet that comes when people are sizing you up. I smiled, nodded politely, and started unloading our things like nothing was wrong. Kyle, of course, couldn't help himself. "So," he said loudly, again making sure everyone could hear, "you really thought it was okay to steal our cabin?" I glanced at him calm. "It wasn't your cabin, Kyle. You didn't pay for it." His wife jumped in, her arms crossed. "Because we were waiting for Mom and Dad to send their part." "You knew that?" I tilted my head. "I knew there was a deadline, and I knew it was going to expire. That's why I paid for it. Simple as that." There was a murmur from some of the cousins, half in agreement, half uncomfortable. Kyle's face was red now. "You did this to humiliate me." I shrugged. "No, I did it to make sure Max and I had a place to stay." And then, because I'd been waiting for this moment for months, I added, "and because maybe it's time someone in this family learned to follow through on their commitments." That was when Dad spoke up from his chair. "Ben, let's not start." "No," I said, my voice steady. "Let's. Because for years, I've been the one holding this family together. I've been the one buying extra gifts, covering for people when they forget, paying for dinners when someone forgets their wallet. And every time I said something, I was told to let it go, to be the bigger person. Well, I am done being the bigger person when it just means being walked on." The entire group was silent now. Even the kids stopped splashing. Kyle laughed bitterly. "Wow, so this is what it's about. Some Christmas presents." "This is about respect," I said sharply. "It's about my son sitting under that tree holding a plastic whistle while you sat there smiling. And when I stood up for him, you turned the entire family against me. You made posts online calling me selfish. You told everyone I ruined Christmas, and not one of you stopped to ask what Max got that morning." I turned, looking at everyone now, Mom, Dad, the cousins, all of them. "Do any of you even know what he got?" No one answered. "A whistle," I said flatly. "That's it. A whistle. And you all told me I was overreacting, that he would get over it." Mom shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not here to fight," I said finally, softer now. "I'm here to enjoy the weekend with my son. But make no mistake, we are done being the afterthought. We are done being the ones who give and get nothing back." I sat back down, calmly opened a soda, and passed one to Max like nothing had happened. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then Mark, bless him, cleared his throat and said, "Honestly, Ben's right. We've all let Kyle skate by for years. Maybe this was overdue. The spell broke then. A few other cousins nodded. Someone even clapped me on the shoulder as they walked by, murmuring, "Good for you, man." Kyle looked like he was about to explode. He muttered something under his breath and stalked off toward the cottages, his wife trailing behind him. The rest of the evening was surprisingly pleasant. Conversations shifted, kids went back to playing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was just another member of the family, not the designated scapegoat or fixer. But the real payoff came later that night. Around 10 p.m., after the campfire had burned low and most of the family had gone to bed, I saw Kyle stomping back toward the lakefront cabin. I braced myself, but instead of yelling, he just stood at the edge of the porch, his face red, his hands clenched. "You made me look bad," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "No," I said, standing up and meeting his eyes. "You did that yourself." He didn't have a comeback for that. After a long moment, he turned and walked away. Max came out onto the porch then, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Everything okay?" I smiled down at him. "Yeah, buddy. Everything's okay." And for the first time, I really meant it. The next morning, the lake was glassy and still, reflecting the pale pink sunrise. Max was already outside on his new bike, riding lazy loops around the cabin's driveway. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, breathing in the quiet. It didn't last. Around 8, Kyle's wife stormed up the path, her face pinched and tight. "We're leaving," she announced, not bothering with a hello. I just nodded. "Okay." She looked thrown by my calmness. "You don't even care?" "Of course I care," I said mildly. "I hope you all have a safe trip." She opened her mouth, probably to unleash whatever lecture she had loaded, but Kyle appeared behind her and grabbed her arm. "Forget it," he muttered. "Let's just go." And just like that, they left. By the time everyone else woke up, the little back cottage was empty. No kids running around. No Kyle making sarcastic jokes. No simmering tension hanging in the air. The whole atmosphere shifted. Lighter, easier, like someone had turned down a noise you didn't realize had been blaring. Throughout the day, aunts and uncles kept stopping by our cabin. "You really said what needed to be said last night," one of my uncles told me as we grilled burgers for lunch. "We've been biting our tongues about Kyle for years." Another cousin admitted, "Honestly, we always felt bad for Max. He got overlooked a lot. Good on you for finally calling it out." It was strange. The same family who had been silent at Christmas was now quietly coming around, acknowledging what I'd known all along. This wasn't a one-time issue. This was a pattern. Even Mom approached me that afternoon, wringing her hands like she didn't know where to start. "Ben," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months, "I think I owe you an apology." I stayed quiet, waiting. "I shouldn't have said Max would get over it," she admitted. "That wasn't fair. You were right. What happened wasn't okay. And we should have asked how he felt before jumping on you." Something loosened in my chest. "Thank you," I said simply. She hesitated. "I just don't know how to fix things with Kyle. He's furious." "That's his choice," I said, not unkindly. "All I can do is make sure my son knows I've got his back." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and I realized she was genuinely trying, maybe for the first time. That evening, we had another campfire, and this time, the laughter felt easy. Max sat between me and Mark, roasting marshmallows until they caught fire, then waving them around like torches. When he finally crawled into my lap, sticky and smelling like smoke, he whispered, "Dad, this is the best trip ever." And just like that, everything felt worth it. The next morning, before we left, I noticed something on the spreadsheet. Kyle had removed his name from all future family events. Not just the reunion, but Thanksgiving, Christmas, even the annual 4th of July barbecue. For a moment, I wondered if I should feel guilty. But then I thought about Max's face that Christmas morning, holding that whistle, and the way Kyle had smiled like it was nothing. No, this was the natural consequence of years of taking without giving. On the drive home, Max was chattering about all the things he wanted to do at the lake next year. "Do you think we'll get the same cabin again?" he asked eagerly. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and smiled. "I think we'll get whatever cabin we want." Because the truth was, I'd already called Rick before we left and put down the deposit for next summer, for the same lakefront cabin. This time, no one could take it away. When we pulled into our driveway, Max hopped out of the truck, ran straight to his bike, and started circling the yard again. I stood there watching him, feeling lighter than I had in a long, long time. No guilt, No anger, just clarity. We had finally drawn the line. And this time, we weren't stepping back. I snapped a picture of Max riding under the afternoon sun, his hair wild and his smile wide, and sent it to the family group chat with a single message. We're doing just fine. And then I muted the chat again. For good. My name's Daniel, and I'm 28 years old. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we are. I grew up in a house that always looked fine from the outside. You know the type. Neatly trimmed hedges, clean windows, polite hellos to the neighbors. But inside, it was different. My dad, Paul, was the kind of man who thought emotions were a weakness and silence was strength. My mom, Ruth, was his quiet shadow, always echoing whatever he said, never contradicting, always keeping the peace. And me? I was the mistake that never quite measured up to their expectations. I wasn't a troublemaker. In fact, I went out of my way to avoid conflict. I studied hard, got decent grades, and eventually landed a stable job in IT. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave me flexibility. Somewhere along the way, I started covering more and more bills at home. At first, it was little things, groceries when the fridge was empty, gas for my dad's truck when it slipped his mind, the water bill just this once. Then it became the norm. The mortgage, utilities, insurance, car payments. Somehow, without ever discussing it, I became the lifeline of the house. And they made it seem like I owed them that. You still live under our roof, Dad would say whenever I asked about setting boundaries. The least you can do is contribute. Even though I worked remote and rarely left my room, I was constantly reminded I didn't truly belong there. He'd say I was freeloading, that I was taking up space. My mom would say it softer, of course. He doesn't mean it like that, she'd murmur after one of his tirades. It's just his way. Don't take it to heart. I tried to keep the peace. I told myself I was helping them because they were struggling. I told myself family meant sacrifice. I told myself they didn't mean the things they said. Until one night, 3 months ago. It was a Thursday, and I'd just finished resolving a nasty systems crash for a client. I was fried, mentally, emotionally, everything. I came out to the kitchen to grab something to eat, and I overheard them talking. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just tired, quiet, and they didn't hear me walk in. She's right, you know, Dad said. He's never going to move out. Never going to be anything. Just a drain. Paul, my mom said, not even defending me. Just sighing. Letting it hang. He's just a burden, he snapped. This family would be better off without him. And that was it. The words didn't even sting. They landed like a dull thud, like something I'd always known but never heard said out loud. I remember standing there, frozen behind the kitchen doorway, staring at the ceramic bowl of bananas on the counter. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just turned around, walked back to my room, and sat down. That night, I quietly packed a single duffel bag, just enough to get by. I'd already saved up for a place of my own, just hadn't signed the lease yet. I thought I was waiting for the right moment. Turns out, that was it. I called the landlord, wired the deposit, and left before dawn. No goodbye, no note, just silence. I didn't block their numbers, at first. I didn't hate them. I just wanted to be invisible to them, like they had made me feel. The first few days, no one called. I guess they didn't notice I was gone. Or maybe they were just too proud to ask. Week 1 went by, then 2. I set up my new apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started sleeping better, breathing easier. My fridge had food I actually liked. My walls were quiet. And for the first time in years, I felt like I existed. Then came week 3. It was a Sunday morning. I was sipping coffee on my tiny balcony, scrolling through emails, when my phone rang. MOM lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Then a text. Danny, can you please call me? Something's wrong. I hesitated. Then, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up on the 4th try. Her voice was trembling. Danny, the lights are out. The cards keep declining. Your father's truck got repossessed yesterday. What's happening? I paused. What do you mean? I said cool and flat. I don't know. Everything's falling apart. We've been trying to pay the bills, but nothing's going through. Your father's furious. We thought maybe there was a problem with the bank. I stayed quiet for a second. Then I said, you told me the family would be better off without me. She went quiet. I left. You didn't stop me. And now you're calling me because your cards aren't working. Danny, please, we didn't mean it. Your dad was just stressed. No, Mom. I interrupted, finally letting that familiar lump rise in my throat. He meant every word. You just stood there. And now you need me again. She sniffled, trying to compose herself. We're sorry. We really are. Can't we just? I'm hanging up now. Please don't. I clicked end, blocked the number, and put my phone on silent. I stood on that balcony for a long while, watching the city move on below me like nothing had happened. But inside, something had shifted. Something final. And that was before the rest of the messages started flooding in. At first, the silence after blocking my mom's number was oddly peaceful. I didn't expect her to give up so easily, but for about half a day, it seemed like maybe she had. Then the messages started coming in from every direction, but not from her. My cousin Andrea was first, then my uncle Mike, then even this distant family friend named Ray who I hadn't seen since I was 15. Hey, your mom's trying to get in touch with you. Something about the bank and your dad's pension being frozen. Dude, your dad's been calling everyone. He's saying something about fraud or account issues. Are you okay? Not to overstep, but your mom's really worried. She says you left suddenly, and now all their bills are bouncing. I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. I just sat in my apartment, phone buzzing every hour, and thought about how many times I'd bailed my parents out. Not just financially, either. My dad couldn't figure out online banking if his life depended on it. My mom never learned how to handle credit cards properly. She used them like monopoly money, figuring someone else would clean up the mess. That someone had been me for over 5 years. The reason their cards were failing now? Easy. All the accounts were in my name. I'd taken on their debt to protect their credit. I'd consolidated it all under mine to get the lower interest rates. Even the utility accounts, power, water, internet, were technically mine. Why? Because my dad didn't trust online billing and my mom always missed deadlines. So I stepped up, quietly, without thanks. And when I left, I didn't pull the plug right away. But after 3 weeks of radio silence, of them not even noticing I was gone, I'd logged into each account, revoked access, and updated all payment info. Autopays, gone. Authorizations, revoked. I didn't cancel anything. I just stopped paying. Let the weight settle exactly where it belonged. 3 more days passed before the first unblocked number broke through. My sister, Erica. She's 5 years older than me and lives out of state. We were never close, but she wasn't cruel either. She called, and this time I answered. Danny. Her voice was quiet, cautious. Hey, I'm not calling to lecture you, she said quickly. Just wanted to talk. Mom's been hysterical. Dad's going crazy. What happened? I sighed. He told me I was a burden. Said the family would be better off without me. So I left. There was a pause. You know he didn't mean it, she said, not unkindly, but with that same tired tone I'd heard my whole life. He says a lot of things when he's angry. That's not an excuse anymore, I replied. And you know it. Another pause. I could hear her breathing through the receiver, hesitant. I get it, she finally said. You've done a lot for them. I didn't know half of it until Mom started panicking. She said the electric bill bounced, the cards are locked, the bank account has some kind of freeze. She couldn't buy groceries yesterday. And Dad, she trailed off. What? I prompted. He's scared, but he's pretending he's not. You know how he is. He just keeps shouting and blaming the bank. Says it's a glitch. But he knows. Good, I said. Maybe he should sit in the dark for a bit. Erica didn't argue, but she didn't hang up either. Are you okay? She asked. I'm figuring it out. Another long silence. Then she said, you don't have to fix it, you know? You don't owe them that. I didn't respond. She'd never said anything like that before. I just wanted you to know, she added. I get why you left. I think you should have done it sooner. That night, I sat on my bed with all the lights off, by choice. It was quiet, calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next outburst. I wasn't calculating how much I could afford to give before I ran dry. I wasn't sitting through another Sunday dinner where no one asked how I was doing. But I also wasn't done. The next day, I got a notification. A failed login attempt on the electric company's portal. Then the water company. Then the cable. My dad was trying to take back control, but all the accounts were secured. 2-factor authentication. Private email. New passwords. He was locked out of his own castle. At 11:42 a.m., I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Daniel, it's your father. That voice. I hadn't heard it since the night he called me a burden. He didn't sound angry this time. Just tired. I don't know what game you're playing, but you made your point. You've embarrassed us enough. You're not going to ruin this family just because you're upset. No apology. Just blame. As if I hadn't spent years cleaning up his messes. As if I hadn't given up my 20s to make sure he and Mom didn't lose the house, the cars, the illusion. I didn't respond. But that night, I did one final thing. I logged into the main account I'd used for all the family expenses. There was still money in it, my money. A decent amount. I moved it into my private account. Then I closed the shared one. It triggered an alert on their end. I knew it would. I wanted it to. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls, 5 voicemails, and a text from my mother that simply said, "Please, Daniel. We need to talk. It's all falling apart." And then another, barely a minute later. "Please come home." I stared at those messages for a long time, thumb hovering over the reply. Then I remembered that kitchen conversation. That bowl of bananas. My father's voice saying, this family would be better off without him. And I realized, maybe he was right. The following days were a strange mix of quiet and chaos. Quiet in my apartment. No yelling, no guilt trips, no footsteps outside my bedroom door at 3 a.m. because Dad decided to start ranting about the good old days again after half a bottle of whatever whiskey was cheapest that month. Just quiet. I could hear myself think. I could cook dinner at midnight and nobody would complain about the smell. I could leave my socks on the couch and nobody would glare at me like I'd just committed treason. But outside that bubble, chaos was unfolding. My mom found a way to start emailing me. I'd forgotten she even remembered my old Gmail account, the one I hadn't used in years. Her first message was short. "We're sorry. Come home. Please." Then another a few hours later. "Your father didn't mean what he said. We're scared. Everything's falling apart." Then another. "Did you shut off the electric? Is that what this is about? Just talk to us." And another. And another. It was like she couldn't stop herself. Like every 20 minutes, she needed to push a new emotional button, hoping one of them might still work. I didn't reply, but I read every single one. One day, I opened one of her longer emails. She'd tried to write it like it was casual, like she was just checking in, but by paragraph 3, it spiraled into a guilt trip so heavy it practically bent my screen. "We're your family, Daniel. We've had our issues, but family sticks together. We don't just leave. We raised you. We made sacrifices. You think we're perfect? We're not. But you don't get to just disappear and destroy everything. Destroy everything." Those 2 words hit me hard. Not because they weren't wrong, but because they were accidentally, completely true. They just didn't realize I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd only let them feel the weight of what they'd built. Or, more accurately, what they'd refused to build themselves. It wasn't just about money or bills. It was about decades of being treated like an emotional punching bag wrapped in a debit card. I was the fix-it son, the Band-Aid boy, quiet, dependable, easy to ignore until they needed something. And now? Now I was the villain in their story. I'd stolen their peace. I'd dismantled their fantasy where everything just worked out because Daniel would handle it. Then the emails turned nasty. "This is cruel, Daniel. You're punishing us. What did we ever do to deserve this? Your dad hasn't been able to sleep. He's talking about calling a lawyer. He says this is financial abuse. We're still your parents." The irony of that last one made me laugh out loud. Not because it wasn't true, but because they finally remembered. When I was useful, I was barely the boy. Now that I was gone, I was suddenly your son. I was still debating whether to respond when my sister called again. "Hey," she said. Her voice was tight. "I just got off the phone with Mom. She says the bank account's gone. That you took it. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine." "Okay," she said softly. "I figured. But you should know, Dad's talking about suing you." I raised an eyebrow, even though she couldn't see me. "Suing me? For what exactly? He doesn't know. He just keeps saying you committed theft. He doesn't get how anything works. He's losing it." "I didn't commit theft," I said. "The account was in my name. Everything was. He's just mad he lost his power." There was a pause. Then Erica sighed. "I'm not calling to guilt you. Just thought you should know. And I know this probably doesn't mean much now, but I wish I'd stood up for you more. When we were younger, when they started treating you like this. I saw it. I just didn't want to be the next target." That part, that hit deeper than I expected. Because as distant as Erica had always been, I'd long suspected she did know. That she just looked the other way. "Thanks," I said, and I meant it. "You're not a burden," she added quietly. I waited for her to say more, but that was it. And it was enough. That weekend, The final layer of their situation began to crumble. On Saturday morning, I got an email alert that the mortgage payment was 17 days past due. Then a letter showed up at their house. Yes, I still had the digital access to the mail notifications. They were behind on everything. And that's when the real desperation kicked in. A call from an unknown number came through. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it later, I was expecting rage or guilt or tears. Instead, it was cold, flat, calculated. Daniel, this is your father. I've spoken with legal. You've overstepped. We gave you a roof. We gave you everything. And you repay us like this? You've made your point. Now fix it, or we'll escalate this. No please. No apology. No ownership. Just a threat. And that was the moment the guilt I'd been quietly nursing evaporated. Because it wasn't just that they didn't see what they'd done wrong. It's that they never would. They weren't panicking because they missed me. They were panicking because they missed what I gave them. My money. My time. My silence. I looked around my little apartment. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have central air, and the walls were thin enough to hear my upstairs neighbor's vacuum at 6 a.m. But it was mine. Every light bulb, every fork, every unpaid bill mine. And suddenly I knew something with absolute clarity. I was never going back. Not even to explain. Not even to say goodbye. And that's when I got the knock on my door. It was subtle. Not loud. But steady. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked over, looked through the peephole, and felt my stomach drop. Because standing there, holding a small duffel bag and a manila folder, was my mother. Alone. Eyes puffy. Mouth tight. Looking like she hadn't slept in days. And before I could decide whether or not to open the door, she spoke through it. Danny, please. We need to talk. Your father doesn't know I'm here. But you need to see something. I didn't move. Not yet. But the folder in her hand? It had my name written on it. In my dad's handwriting. And that changed everything. I stood there behind the door, barely breathing. My mom didn't knock again. She didn't shout. She just waited, clutching the manila folder like it weighed 50 pounds instead of a few sheets of paper. For a second, I considered just walking away. Sitting back down, letting her knock until she gave up and left. But something about the way she stood there, still, small, not rehearsed or manipulative, made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She didn't rush in or throw her arms around me like some dramatic apology scene from a movie. She just stepped back slightly and looked at me like she was trying to remember the face of her own son. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stared at her a moment longer, then opened the door wider. She walked in, eyes darting around the apartment like it was some foreign country she'd only heard rumors about. I hadn't cleaned up. There were dishes in the sink, an empty takeout box on the counter, laundry in a basket by the door. And yet, she looked at it all like it was a cathedral, like she hadn't realized I could exist on my own. I motioned to the table. She sat. So did I? She placed the folder on the table between us and just stared at it. "What is that?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her hands trembled a little as she slid it across to me. "It's everything your father kept hidden," she said softly. "From you. From me. From everyone." I opened the folder slowly. Inside were a series of printed statements, old bank records, emails, and what looked like scanned documents from a lawyer's office. At the top of the stack was a typed-up notice from over 3 years ago, a debt consolidation approval for over $72,000 in credit card balances. In my name. My jaw clenched as I flipped through more pages. More debt, more transactions, balances, and my social security number stamped across nearly every one. "He used your information, Daniel," she whispered. "Long before you started helping with the bills. That's how he started." I looked up at her, stunned. "You knew?" "I didn't," she said, voice shaking. "Not until last week. When the power was shut off and the car was gone and the bank started sending letters. I didn't even know about the second mortgage. He used your name for that too." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "The house is in my name?" "Partially," she said. "He transferred it without telling you. Said you agreed to help build family equity." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "He forged my signature?" She just nodded. Her eyes were red and tired, and for the first time in a long time, I realized she wasn't wearing any makeup. Her armor was gone. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "You didn't stop him when he said I was a burden. You didn't say a word when I left." She swallowed hard. "Because I was scared. And selfish. And because I wanted to believe he was right. That you were just difficult. that we were doing the best we could. I didn't want to believe we were hurting you. You did hurt me, I said, my voice low and controlled. You watched him break me down for years. You stood by while he called me a failure. You let me pay for everything and told yourself that was love. She looked down, ashamed. You didn't protect me, I added. You protected him. I know, she whispered. I can't take that back. But I can give you this. You deserve to know what he did. And I needed you to see I'm not defending him anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence hung heavy between us. I moved out, she finally said. Yesterday. I'm staying with Andrea for now. I'm trying to figure out what's next. I studied her face. She looked older, smaller, like she'd finally stepped off the pedestal she and Dad had climbed together. And him? I asked. She shook her head. He doesn't know I'm here. He still thinks he's the victim. Keeps saying you'll come crawling back. That you'll do the right thing. She looked me in the eye. I don't think he's capable of understanding what he's done. I exhaled. I didn't want to feel anything, but something deep in my chest ached. Not for him, but for the version of me that had spent so many years trying to be good enough for people who never saw him. I've already started closing things, I said. Reclaiming what's mine. The accounts. The debt. The house. She nodded. That's why I brought the documents. So you'll have evidence if he tries anything. I wanted you to be protected. A long pause. Then she added, you don't have to forgive me. I know that. But I hope, someday, maybe we can talk again. I didn't answer right away. I didn't promise anything. But I also didn't push her out the door. After a while, she stood. I'll go, she said. I just wanted to give you this. And say thank you. For everything you did. Even when we didn't deserve it. I walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned back. Take care of yourself, Danny. I didn't say anything. I just watched her walk down the hall and disappear into the stairwell. Then I closed the door and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was broken, but because I wasn't anymore. Over the next few weeks, I met with a lawyer, showed them the folder. We began preparing documents, an identity theft report, property transfer reversal filings, and notices to creditors. My lawyer was furious. Said we had a strong case. Said we could go after him. I told him I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted my name cleared, my records restored, and everything tied to them gone. It took 6 months, but I got it all. The debt? Cleared. The house? Removed from my name. My credit? Recovered. And I changed my number. Moved again. Quietly, without fanfare. This time to a place with more light. A little balcony that faced the sunrise. I got a dog. A mutt named Jasper who didn't care where I came from. Just that I was kind. I started living for me. And sometimes, late at night, I'd think about that kitchen. That bowl of bananas. And how a single sentence, this family would be better off without you, set me free. It took me years to realize it wasn't true. But now I know. I was never the burden. I was the foundation they leaned on, until they cracked it themselves. I'm Jake, 27, and if you asked most people who knew me growing up, they'd probably tell you I was the lucky one. Straight A student, got a full ride to college, landed a solid tech job after graduation, and probably the part they cared about most was the only one in the family who ever seemed to make it. What they don't say is that luck came with a price, and it was usually my silence. I stayed quiet when my sister, Carly, got bailed out of her 3rd DUI with my emergency fund. I stayed quiet when my parents borrowed my graduation money to fix their roof and forgot to pay it back. And I especially stayed quiet when I became the family ATM, disguised as the responsible child who could handle a little extra pressure. For years, that was the dynamic. I was the fixer, the helper, the son who'd show up with bags of groceries unprompted, pay for someone's medical bill without asking, or wire money because the car broke down again. And every time I questioned it, it turned into guilt. You're just better off, Jake. You know your sisters had a hard life. You wouldn't let us suffer, would you? Thanksgiving was always the one time I convinced myself it was okay to pretend. I'd fly in, play the good son, watch my mom tear up over dry turkey, and smile while Dad made the same 5 jokes about, when are you going to settle down? I used to think it was worth it. I don't anymore. This past Thanksgiving, something felt different the moment I walked in. There was no Jake. You're here, or overly warm hug from Mom. Just a lukewarm, oh, hi, as she wiped her hands on a dish towel. Carly gave me a once-over and barely looked up from her phone. I chalked it up to stress. They always acted weird when money was tight, and when a drop off the bottle I brought in the kitchen. That's when I noticed the family album sitting out on the coffee table. Now, that thing hadn't made an appearance in years. Last I saw it, it was buried in a box in the attic, filled with all those classic awkward kid photos. Me in overalls, Carly missing her 2 front teeth, our parents looking 20 years younger at Christmas. It used to be a staple during holidays. So, I was surprised it was out again. Maybe someone was feeling nostalgic. I picked it up while everyone was busy chatting and flipping between football games, and casually started turning the pages. The first few were fine, baby pictures, birthdays, some blurry vacation shots. But as I kept going, I noticed something odd. Every single photo that had me in it was torn. Not just cut out. Ripped. Sloppily. As if someone had taken a moment to look at me in the picture, and then decided I didn't belong. At first, I thought maybe it was an accident. Maybe some pages got stuck, or water damage had ruined them. But no, Carly's face was untouched. There she was in every photo, smiling, laughing, front and center. I flipped through page after page, and every time my face appeared in a picture, it was shredded out. My high school graduation? Just Carly and my parents, smiling in front of a banner I paid for. That Christmas where I bought everyone gifts even though I was living on instant noodles? My gift pile gone, just Carly opening presents. My heart was pounding. My face felt hot. I sat there, staring at the destruction of 27 years of proof that I existed in this family. And not one person said anything. I carefully closed the album and put it back exactly where I found it. I didn't say a word. Dinner that evening was the usual passive-aggressive marathon. Mom criticized the store-bought rolls I brought, even though she'd asked me to bring them. Carly complained about her job, again, and hinted that her rent had gone up. Dad made an offhand comment about young people today wasting money on avocado toast, which was hilarious considering I'd paid off his credit card debt last spring. The whole time, I smiled. I nodded. I laughed at their jokes. But inside, something had cracked. Something had finally, fully broken. After dessert, while Mom was fussing over dishes and Carly was scrolling TikTok like a teenager, I quietly pulled out the envelope I'd brought with me. It was simple. White. No label. I laid it down on the dining table. "What's this?" Carly asked, eyeing it like it might explode. "It's not for here," I said calmly. "Open it later." Of course, that meant she opened it immediately. She slid the letter out and started reading. At first, her expression was confusion. Then, anger. She handed it to Mom, who read it with trembling hands. I watched her eyes scan the page. Her mouth dropped open just slightly. She clutched her chest like she'd been winded. And then, she started crying. Not just sniffling. Sobbing. The kind of crying you do when you realize something's not just broken, but shattered. My dad, who was halfway through pouring himself a drink, froze. He took the letter from my mom and read it. Slowly, line by line. His hands started to shake. His lips pressed into a thin, tight line. But he didn't say a word. No one did. And that's where I left them. The letter, written days before, was short, but it carried the weight of years. I had gone over it 100 times, rewriting and deleting and second-guessing. But in the end, it said exactly what it needed to. I told them I was done. Done being the safety net. Done being the scapegoat. Done pretending this family was built on love instead of manipulation. I reminded them of every time they'd taken from me emotionally, financially, mentally, and how they'd never once offered anything back except expectation and blame. I told them I saw the album. I saw what they'd done, and it was the last insult I'd accept. I explained that I would no longer be covering Carly's rent, that I would not be helping with Dad's medical bills or Mom's car repairs, that the next time someone hit rock bottom, they'd need to figure it out without me. And finally, I told them I wasn't coming back. Not for Christmas. Not for birthdays. Not for anything. As the room filled with silence, I picked up my coat, gave them one last glance, and walked out the door. But that's not even the craziest part. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say they didn't take it quietly. By the time I reached my car, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the neighborhood bathed in this weird, grayish dusk. Everything looked cold. Even the houses with those cheerful, early Christmas lights seemed to buzz with this artificial warmth that didn't touch me. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, engine off, fingers gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wasn't sure what I expected. Yelling? Guilt-tripping? Maybe Mom running out to the driveway, mascara streaking down her cheeks, begging me not to do this to the family? Instead, nothing. Not a single word followed me out. Just silence. that almost made it worse. It was the kind of silence that didn't mean shock. It meant calculation, retaliation. And I knew my family well enough to know they wouldn't let this go without a response. I drove back to my Airbnb across town, a tiny one-bedroom with creaky floors and a heater that hummed like a lawnmower. It was ugly, but it was mine. I threw my bag down and sat on the bed, staring at my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I waited an hour. Still nothing. The next day, it began. At first, it was subtle. I woke up to a vague Facebook post from Carly. Some people really show their true colors when money's off the table. Followed by the kind of vague inspirational quote that made her feel like she was the wounded party. Family is supposed to be your safe place, not your battlefield. Classic Carly. Passive-aggressive, just public enough to stir sympathy but not specific enough to warrant confrontation. Then Mom joined in. Her post was more dramatic. A black and white photo of her and Carly when she was a baby, captioned, "No matter what happens, I'll always be proud of my girl. Loyalty matters more than money." I didn't respond. I didn't even react. I knew they were hoping I'd take the bait, that I'd jump in to defend myself or try to explain. But this wasn't a conversation. This was performance art. But what I didn't expect was what came next, the phone calls to my friends. Some background. Back in high school, I had this tight-knit group of 3 friends, Ben, Marcus, and Layla. We'd stayed in touch over the years, met up when I was in town, shared group chats, and the occasional game night over Zoom. They knew my family was complicated, but I never really unloaded on them. I always felt like talking about it too much made it real in a way I wasn't ready to admit. Apparently, my mom didn't feel the same hesitation. Marcus texted me first. "Hey man, weird question. Did something happen with your family? Your mom called me. Said she's worried about you." Then Ben. "Yo, got a voicemail from your mom. Something about you being under stress and needing people around you? She okay?" Even Layla, who hadn't talked to my mom in years, messaged me, "Your mom found my number through an old directory from college. She said you're pushing everyone away and asked me to reach out." What's going on? It was surreal. They were trying to stage an intervention on me. After cutting them off, the worst part was that I almost fell for it. A small voice in my head started whispering, "Maybe you overreacted. Maybe they're just hurt. Maybe this is all just a misunderstanding." But then I remembered the photos. The way they didn't even flinch when I saw the album. The way my existence had been scrubbed from family history like an inconvenience. They weren't hurt. They were caught. Still, I felt sick. Not because I regretted anything, but because it confirmed something I'd been denying for a long time. I wasn't their son. I was their investment. And now that the returns had dried up, I was being liquidated. I sent a group message to my friends, calmly explaining what happened. I didn't rant. I didn't badmouth anyone. I just laid it out, point by point. The years of manipulation, the money, the guilt, the photos, the letter, and how I was finally choosing peace over obligation. Their responses were unanimous. "Ben, dude, I don't even have words. I'm proud of you. You deserve better than that circus. Layla, I'm so sorry you went through that. Thank you for trusting us enough to tell us. Whatever you need, I've got your back. Marcus, families are supposed to love you, not drain you. You did the right thing. Seriously, that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because 2 days later, I got a call from my boss. Now, I work remotely for a mid-sized tech company. I've always kept work and family completely separate. But somehow, my mom found a way in. Apparently, she'd called my company's front desk and asked to speak to HR. Said she was worried about her son's mental state and thought they should be aware of some dangerous behavior. Let me repeat that. My mother tried to tank my career because I wouldn't pay for her lifestyle anymore. Thankfully, my boss is a level-headed guy. He told me about the call privately, said he figured something weird was going on, and that I might want to handle it personally. He even offered me some PTO if I needed to clear my head. I declined. I needed the structure, the normalcy, something to hold onto while my entire sense of family collapsed like a cheap card table. That night, I finally blocked my mom's number. And Carly's. And even my dad's, though he hadn't reached out once since I left, unless you count liking Carly's pity posts on Facebook. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Because a few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No signature. Just 4 words written in all caps. You owe us everything. And just like that, the game changed. I sat at my tiny Airbnb kitchen table, holding that letter like it might combust in my hands. The paper trembled a little, not from some dramatic wind or anything, but because my fingers were shaking. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something colder, more surgical, like the feeling right before you put pressure on a wound you know needs stitches. I stared at those 4 words for a long time. You owe us everything. Everything. Not thanks for everything you've done. Not please let's talk. Not even how could you. Just owe. Like I was property. Like they were collecting on a debt. That was the moment I realized I wasn't fighting for respect anymore. I was just trying to escape a contract I never signed. I sat back, letting the envelope drop to the table. I felt this strange calm come over me, the kind you only get after you stop hoping things can go back to how they were. That tiny part of me, the kid who still believed his parents loved him unconditionally, finally gave up the ghost. And once it did, I started thinking differently. Sharper. Like an engineer breaking down a faulty circuit. What had I done wrong? Where was the system broken? That night, I pulled out my laptop and started compiling everything. Not for revenge, not yet, just clarity. I went through my bank statements for the last 6 years. Every wire transfer to Carly. Every payment to my parents' utility bills. Every loan that was never repaid. The total made my stomach twist. I'd known it was a lot, but this? It was almost 6 figures. Rent, credit card bailouts, down payments, car repairs, private school tuition for Carly's kid, even groceries. And none of it ever came with a thank you. Just expectation. I added screenshots of texts. The ones where my mom said things like, "You wouldn't leave us struggling, would you?" Or, "You don't want Carly and the baby to get evicted." The ones where I said yes, even when I was on ramen and scraping by. And then I found something I'd forgotten all about. It was a recording. Just audio, saved automatically to my phone. From 3 months earlier, when I had visited for my dad's birthday and accidentally hit the record button, it recorded their conversation while I went away for a minute. I remembered the visit being tense, but I had chalked it up to general dysfunction. What I heard on the recording, it was something else. It started with my mom whispering to Carly in the kitchen while I was supposedly outside. "We have to keep him close, okay? Don't make him mad. Not until after the mortgage clears. Once the refinance goes through, then he can do whatever he wants. Carly, he's already pulling back. He asked for the receipts from the car thing. Mom, so? Fake some. You know how to do that. He's too busy to check. Dad." While laughing, he won't walk away. "He's too soft. Always has been." It was like listening to strangers. Like a family I had only imagined in nightmares. Not one of them sounded even a little conflicted. They were strategizing, planning, like I was a business deal, or a checkbook with arms. I pressed stop. That was the final nail in the coffin. The letter, the calls, the silence, the Facebook melodrama, they were symptoms. This recording? This was the disease. Still, I didn't act. Not yet. I wanted to. Believe me. Every fiber of my being wanted to send them a copy with "Congratulations, you played yourselves," in giant font. But this wasn't going to be another emotional outburst. They'd see that coming. No, if I was going to end this, really end it, I had to be patient. Strategic. Like they had been. So I waited. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't post anything. I didn't even talk to my friends about it beyond a simple "things are still weird." I wanted them to think I was hurt. Maybe even regretting it. That's when people like my family get bold, when they think you're vulnerable again. And I was right. 3 days later, I got an email from my mom. No subject line. Just one sentence. "You can still fix this if you stop being dramatic." Attached was a scanned letter. It was from a lawyer, hers. Apparently, they were exploring legal options regarding unfulfilled family obligations, and if I refused to support Carly during her custody case, they'd be forced to consider consequences. I stared at it, numb. They were threatening to sue me for not supporting my adult sister in court. I didn't even know what to do with that. What were they going to sue me for? Not paying her lawyer bills. Not emotionally babysitting her through her custody battle with a guy she had dated for 3 weeks? At first, I almost laughed. The absurdity was overwhelming. But the more I sat with it, the more it started to burn. Because even if it was baseless, even if it never made it to a courtroom, it was the principle. They were trying to punish me for pulling away, to teach me a lesson. And that's when I realized I'd been thinking too small. They wanted a lesson? Fine. I'd give them one they'd never forget. For the next 2 weeks, I went quiet. On the outside, I played it cool, No dramatic posts, no angry emails, no frantic responses. Just silence. But on the inside, I was preparing. First, I lawyered up. Not because I thought they had a real case. They didn't. But because I wanted to be protected. I found a small but sharp attorney who specialized in family law and harassment cases. After one meeting and a look at the fake legal thread, he smirked and said, "This won't hold water. But let's hit back harder." Then I took all the receipts I'd gathered, the wire transfers, the texts, the emails, even the recording. I organized them into a neat little digital file titled Family Exploitation Evidence. It was over 80 pages long. I gave it to my lawyer, who helped me draft a cease and desist letter citing harassment, emotional distress, and financial exploitation. We didn't just demand that they back off. We stated, clearly and formally, that any further attempts to contact me, pressure me financially, or defame me publicly would result in a civil suit. We'd even calculated an approximate value of everything they had taken over the years. It was 6 figures. Then, I mailed the letter. Certified, return receipt requested. One to each of them, Mom, Dad, Carly. But I didn't stop there. Remember how my mom had contacted my workplace? That call had crossed a major line. So, I had my attorney send a formal complaint to the HR department of her job. She worked part-time at a local clinic. It wasn't malicious, it was factual. I explained the situation, backed it with evidence, and mentioned how her false claims to my employer had caused unnecessary professional stress. I didn't ask them to fire her. I just wanted them aware of her behavior. But I knew how small towns worked. Word would spread. Then came the final step. One by one, I reached out to extended family, the ones I'd always kept at arm's length because I didn't want to air dirty laundry. My mom's sister, my dad's cousin, even my late grandmother's best friend, who'd always sent me handwritten cards. I didn't send them a manifesto or a dramatic tell-all, just a simple message. Hey, just so you know, there's been a lot of drama on Mom and Carly's side. I'm stepping away from the family for my mental health. If you hear anything wild, feel free to check in with me directly. Some ignored me, but a few responded, and once I shared a bit more, they were stunned. One even said, "That explains why your mom's been spinning this whole story about you being ungrateful." I thought it sounded off. Exactly. The fallout was slow but satisfying. Carly tried to stir sympathy online, posting more cryptic quotes and passive-aggressive digs, but without me funding her rent or legal costs. Her custody case started to fall apart. Her ex filed for full custody, and he won. I wasn't happy about it, especially for her kid, but I didn't feel guilty either. I had tried to help for years, and she'd used me. My dad didn't reach out. Not once. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he didn't care. Either way, silence suited me just fine. My mom, on the other hand, didn't give up so easily. After getting the cease and desist, she went quiet for a few days. Then, she sent a handwritten letter, mailed to my old address, which luckily was forwarded. It was 5 pages long, rambling, defensive, full of the usual guilt tactics. We're your only family. You misunderstood everything. We only ever wanted what's best for you. I read it once. Then I fed it into the shredder. I haven't spoken to them since. It's been about 6 months now. I moved into a new apartment, my own place, no family photos on the wall, just peace. I finally booked a trip I'd been putting off for years. Greece. I stood on a cliff in Santorini, overlooking the water, thinking about how much of my life I'd spent carrying other people's weight. And for the first time, I felt light. Not because I got revenge, not because I won, but because I stopped letting people who didn't love me conditionally define what I owed them. They had taken a lot from me. Time, money, memories. But the one thing I refused to let them keep was me. And that, I think, was the real victory.